So here's the deal. You've probably heard of Lasso and Ridge regression, but what if I told you there's a way to combine their best parts into a single powerful technique? That's what elastic net regularization is all about. It takes the strengths of both methods, balances them just right, and creates a model that's both robust and flexible, perfect for handling messy, high-dimensional data. But hold on, before we dive into why this matters, let's first break down what makes Lasso and Ridge tick. Lasso is the one that aggressively trims down your model, zeroing out coefficients to keep only the most important predictors. It's the Marie Kondo of regression. If a feature doesn't spark joy, or in this case, predictive power, it's gone. On the other hand, Ridge doesn't eliminate features entirely, but instead pulls them back, making sure no predictor dominates the model. Think of it like a coach who keeps all the players in the game, but ensures no one hogs the ball. So what happens when you mix these two? Enter Elastic Net, a hybrid that selects important variables like Lasso while keeping them stable like Ridge. It's the best of both worlds. But of course, with great power comes great responsibility. You need to tune the right hyperparameters, balance the penalties correctly, and ensure you don't accidentally overfit the model. But don't worry, I'll walk you through all of that, step by step. We'll start with the mathematical foundations, but don't panic. It won't just be a bunch of dry formulas. I'll explain the intuition behind them in a way that makes sense. Then we'll look at real-world applications. Finance, genomics, marketing, you name it, Elastic Net has been there. Ever wondered how banks predict credit risk? Or how scientists identify disease-related genes from thousands of candidates? Yep, Elastic Net plays a major role, but here's where it gets really fun. We're going hands-on. I'll show you how to implement Elastic Net in Python and R, fine-tune the parameters, and interpret the results like a pro. We'll talk about common pitfalls, like when Elastic Net is overkill and when it might not be the best choice. And let's not forget the practical challenges of working with real-world data, handling missing values, scaling features, and ensuring your model generalizes well. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, we'll level up. Ever heard of Elastic Net in time series forecasting? Or how it integrates with ensemble methods like boosting and bagging? Yep, we're going there. And of course, because no good model lives in isolation, we'll talk about deployment, how to monitor model performance, avoid drift, and ensure it keeps delivering accurate predictions over time. By the end of this, you won't just know what Elastic Net is. You'll know when and how to use it like a seasoned data scientist. So, are you ready to master one of the most powerful regularization techniques out there? Stick with me, and let's make this journey both insightful and, dare I say, fun. You ever feel like regression models are either too rigid or too chaotic? Like, on one hand, ridge regression is that friend who never lets go of anything. It keeps every feature, no matter how useless. Then there's Lasso, which is the opposite. It straight up deletes variables like a ruthless data assassin. So, which one do you choose? What if I told you you don't have to? Welcome to Elastic Net Regularization, the best of both worlds. It's the perfect blend of Ridge and Lasso, giving you the power to shrink down unnecessary noise while keeping the most important predictors in check. Think of it like having a personal trainer for your model, one that doesn't just cut out the junk food, but also makes sure you're still getting all the nutrients you need. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, great, another fancy ML technique to memorize, trust me, this one is worth your time. Why? Because it fixes one of the biggest headaches in machine learning, multicollinearity. You know, when features are so tangled up with each other that your model starts acting confused, assigning random importance to different predictors, Elastic Net cuts through that mess like a pro. And this isn't just theoretical talk, it's being used everywhere. Finance, healthcare, genomics, marketing, even predicting customer churn. If your dataset has a ton of variables, some of which are way too similar, this is your secret weapon. So In this video, we're going deep. I'll break down how Elastic Net works, when to use it, and most importantly, how to implement it step by step in Python and R. By the end of this, you won't just know about Elastic Net, you'll be able to use it like a pro. And hey, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because we do deep dives like this all the time. Drop a comment if you've ever struggled with overfitting or feature selection, and let's make this a conversation. Now let's dive in. All right, now that we've set the stage, let's get into the first major piece of the puzzle, lasso regression. And no, I'm not talking about cowboy ropes. Lasso, which stands for Least Absolute Shrinkage and Selection Operator, is basically the Marie Kondo of regression models. You've got a data set full of features, but not all of them are equally important. Some are doing all the heavy lifting while others are just along for the ride. Lasso steps in and says, hey, if a feature isn't pulling its weight, let's shrink it down to 0 and move on. That's right. Lasso doesn't just reduce the influence of weak predictors, it completely eliminates them. It applies what's called L1 regularization, which means it penalizes the absolute values of your coefficients. The result? A model that's not only more interpretable but also resistant to overfitting. Here's why that's a big deal. Imagine you're building a model to predict house prices. You've got a ton of variables: square footage, number of bedrooms, location, year built, the color of the front door, because why not? Now, in a traditional regression, every one of these features gets a coefficient, whether it's useful or not. But what if some of them are just noise? Like, maybe the color of the front door has absolutely no impact on price, but because of quirks in the data, it gets assigned a tiny but non-zero coefficient. That's where Lasso shines. It will completely remove useless variables, leaving you with only the most important predictors. Sounds great, right? Well, not so fast. Lasso has a problem. It struggles when features are highly correlated. Let's go back to that house pricing example. If you have both square footage and number of rooms in your dataset, chances are they're super related. Traditional Lasso will pick one of them and completely discard the other. But what if both actually contain useful information? That's where things start to break down. And that's exactly why Elastic Net exists. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. For now, just remember, Lasso is fantastic for feature selection. It's lean, it's mean, and it will simplify your model like a champ. But if your features have a lot of overlap, you might run into trouble. Next up, we're going to talk about ridge regression, the method that takes the opposite approach. Instead of deleting features, ridge keeps everything but applies a different kind of penalty. Is it better than Lasso? Is it worse? Or do we need something that combines the best of both? Well, that's what we're about to find out. Let's keep going. All right, we just talked about how Lasso is the minimalist of regression. It aggressively cuts features down to size, sometimes to the point of deleting them entirely. Now let's flip the script and talk about ridge regression, the method that takes a very different approach. If Lasso is like a ruthless decluttering expert who tosses out everything that doesn't spark joy, ridge is more like a strict librarian. It keeps every book on the shelf, but reorganizes them so that no single one dominates the collection. Instead of outright eliminating features, ridge shrinks all the coefficients closer to 0 while keeping them in the model. Here's how it works. Ridge regression applies L2 regularization, which penalizes the sum of squared coefficients instead of their absolute values, like Lasso does. The effect? It reduces the impact of unimportant variables without making their coefficients exactly 0. So, even the weaker predictors stay in the game, but they don't get too much influence. Let's bring this to life with an example. Say we're building a model to predict employee salaries in a company. We have all sorts of variables: years of experience, education level, job role, department, even how often they bring donuts to the office, because let's be real, that should count. Now, some of these variables will be tightly related. Years of experience and seniority level, of course, they're correlated. Department and job title, same deal. In a standard regression, multicollinearity, aka when predictors are too closely related, can create a mess. The model struggles to decide which variable matters more, leading to unstable coefficients. That's where ridge regression comes in. Instead of choosing between two highly correlated variables, like Lasso would, ridge just shrinks their coefficients proportionally. It distributes influence across related predictors rather than making a harsh keep or delete decision. This keeps the model more stable and reduces the impact of multicollinearity. Sounds pretty great, right? Well, not so fast. Ridge has its own downside. Since it never fully eliminates variables, it can lead to bloated models with unnecessary complexity. Even if a feature barely adds value, ridge still keeps it in play, which isn't always ideal. And this brings us to the big question. What if we want the best of both worlds? A model that removes useless predictors like Lasso, but stabilizes correlated ones like ridge. That, my friends, is where Elastic Net comes into play. So what happens when you take ridge and Lasso and blend them into one supercharged regularization method? That's exactly what we're about to explore next. Let's keep going. All right. Now that we've seen Lasso, the feature slasher, and ridge, the coefficient shrinker, let's talk about the real star of the show, Elastic Net regularization. This is where things get exciting because Elastic Net takes the best parts of both methods and creates something far more powerful. So here's the deal. Lasso is great because it picks out only the most important features, making the model interpretable. But it struggles with highly correlated predictors, sometimes dropping valuable variables completely. Ridge, on the other hand, keeps all the features and smooths out their influence, handling multicollinearity like a champ. But because it never eliminates anything, it can lead to bloated models that aren't as clean as we'd like. What if we didn't have to choose between these two approaches? What if we could combine them to get the strengths of both without the weaknesses? Well, that's exactly what Elastic Net does. It uses both L1 and L2 penalties, blending feature selection from Lasso with coefficient shrinkage from ridge. Elastic Net applies a weighted mix of the two penalties. That means you don't have to pick between Lasso and ridge. You can fine-tune how much of each method you want to use. It introduces a mixing parameter, A, that controls this balance. If A has or core 1, Elastic Net behaves just like Lasso, aggressively shrinking some coefficients to 0. If A has 0, it acts like ridge, keeping all predictors and just reducing their influence. And if A is somewhere in between, you get the best of both worlds, sparse feature selection like Lasso, but without the instability issues caused by correlated predictors. Imagine you're working with genetic data, trying to find which genes are linked to a disease. You've got thousands of features, many of them correlated because genes tend to work together. If you use Lasso, it might delete some genes entirely, even though they still have important relationships with the disease. If you use ridge, it keeps everything, even the irrelevant ones. But Elastic Net can select whole groups of related genes while still removing the noise. This isn't just about genetics. It applies to finance, marketing, customer churn prediction, and any high-dimensional dataset where feature selection is important, but correlation can't be ignored. And let's be real, no dataset is perfect. Real-world data is messy, noisy, and full of useless features. Elastic Net makes sure that your model isn't just accurate, but also stable and interpretable. Now, you might be wondering, how do we actually apply Elastic Net in practice? What do the formulas look like, and how do we fine-tune the parameters? Well, that's exactly what we're going to tackle next. Stick with me, because we're about to get hands-on. Okay, now we're getting to the real magic. How does Elastic Net actually work? It's one thing to say it balances Lasso and Ridge, but what's actually happening under the hood? This is where we break down the mathematical formulation, but don't worry, I'm not about to hit you with a wall of equations and expect you to memorize them like some kind of human calculator. No, we're going to make this make sense in a way that actually sticks. So here's the deal. Elastic Net is solving an optimization problem. Normally, in a regression model, we try to minimize the difference between our predictions and the actual values. But Elastic Net doesn't just minimize error. It also applies two penalties, one from Lasso, one from Ridge. The full equation sounds a little something like this. We minimize 1 over 2n times the sum of squared differences between actual values and predicted values, plus lambda 1 times the absolute sum of the coefficients, plus lambda 2 times the sum of squared coefficients. Or, in a more natural way to think about it, that first part is just our regular loss function, which measures how wrong our predictions are. The first penalty term, which is lambda 1 times the sum of absolute values of the coefficients, is the Lasso penalty. This is what pushes some coefficients to exactly 0, meaning some features are completely removed from the model. The second penalty term, which is lambda 2 times the sum of squared values of the coefficients, is the Ridge penalty. Instead of removing features, it shrinks them, preventing any one feature from dominating too much. These two lambda values, lambda 1 and lambda 2, control how much L1 Lasso versus L2 Ridge regularization we apply. But Elastic Net introduces one more key parameter, alpha, that controls the mix between these two penalties. If alpha equals 1, you get pure Lasso behavior, aggressively removing unimportant features. If alpha equals 0, you get pure Ridge behavior, keeping all the features but shrinking them down. If alpha is somewhere in between, you get the best of both worlds, keeping correlated features together while still kicking out the truly useless ones. Think of it like a custom mixing dial on a soundboard. You don't have to choose between two extremes. You can adjust the balance to fit your specific dataset. If your data has a ton of correlated predictors, Ridge will help stabilize them, but if you need a simpler model with only the most important variables, Lasso will take care of that. With Elastic Net, you can tune it exactly how you need. But here's the real question. How do we actually choose the right values for lambda 1, lambda 2, and alpha? Because if you get them wrong, you either overfit, memorizing noise, or underfit, missing important patterns. That's where hyperparameter tuning comes in. And in the next section, we're going to break down exactly how to find the perfect settings using cross-validation, because this is the part that takes your model from decent to unstoppable. So let's keep going. This is where the real magic happens. Now that we've got the math behind Elastic Net locked down, let's talk about why it's actually useful. Because let's be honest, nobody cares about a fancy equation unless it solves a real-world problem. So why should you use Elastic Net instead of just sticking with Lasso or Ridge? What makes it special? First up, it's a lifesaver when dealing with high-dimensional data. If you've ever worked with a dataset where the number of predictors is larger than the number of observations, think genomics, finance, or marketing, you know that traditional regression methods just crumble. Lasso alone might eliminate too many features, and Ridge might keep too many. Elastic Net keeps the balance, making sure you're not overloading your model with noise while still capturing essential patterns. Then there's the multicollinearity problem. When two or more predictors are highly correlated, Lasso just picks one and throws the others away, sometimes making arbitrary decisions that hurt your model's accuracy. Ridge keeps all of them, but reduces their influence. Elastic Net does something smarter. It allows entire groups of correlated features to stay in the model while still shrinking their impact. So if you're dealing with data where variables are tightly linked, say multiple economic indicators affecting stock prices, Elastic Net ensures that no single variable gets unfairly removed just because it shares information with another. And let's talk about predictive performance. Models that overfit to training data might look great in practice tests, but the moment they face real-world data, they fall apart. Elastic Net helps prevent overfitting by keeping only the most important features while reducing the dominance of others. That means better generalization and stronger performance when your model encounters new data. It's like training for a marathon by running on hills and different terrains. You're preparing your model to handle all sorts of scenarios, not just the perfect conditions in training. But it's not just about getting better predictions, it's also about interpretability. A lot of machine learning models today are basically black boxes. Elastic Net, on the other hand, lets you see exactly which variables matter and by how much. That's a game changer in industries where decisions need to be explained, like finance, healthcare, and policymaking. To sum it up, Elastic Net gives you the best of both worlds: Lasso's feature selection, Ridge's stability, and an added layer of flexibility to handle tricky datasets. It's reliable, interpretable, and works exceptionally well when predictors are correlated or when you're working with a massive number of features. But of course, nothing is perfect, and Elastic Net has its own set of challenges. So before we go any further, let's take a look at the drawbacks, because understanding when not to use Elastic Net is just as important as knowing when it's the right tool for the job. Yeah, we've talked about all the great things Elastic Net can do, but let's be real, no technique is perfect. Just like Lasso and Ridge have their limitations, Elastic Net also comes with a few challenges that you need to be aware of before using it, because sometimes choosing the wrong regularization method can actually make your model worse, not better. The first issue is overfitting. Yes, even though Elastic Net is supposed to help prevent it, if you don't tune the hyperparameters properly, you might still end up with a model that's too complex. If you set the penalty parameters too low, Elastic Net doesn't regularize enough and your model just memorizes noise. Set them too high and it might remove important predictors along with the irrelevant ones. So just like making coffee, you need to find the right balance or you're going to regret it. Then there's computational complexity. Unlike Ridge or Lasso, where you only have to tune one penalty parameter, Elastic Net makes you juggle two, lambda 1 and lambda 2. This means that training an Elastic Net model takes more time and computational power, especially if you're working with really large data sets. It's like trying to find the perfect balance between spicy and sweet in a recipe. You have twice the number of dials to adjust. That's why cross-validation is so important, but we'll get to that later. Another challenge is interpretability. Sure, Elastic Net selects features like Lasso and stabilizes coefficients like Ridge, but when you mix both penalties, the final model can sometimes be a little harder to interpret. Unlike pure Lasso, where some coefficients are exactly zero, Elastic Net might keep weak predictors in play with very small values. That means your model isn't as sparse as Lasso, and while that's usually a good thing for stability, it might make it harder to explain which features are truly driving the predictions. And finally, Elastic Net isn't always necessary. If your data has no multicollinearity, Lasso might be enough. If you don't need to remove any variables at all and just want to shrink coefficients, Ridge could be the simpler and faster choice. In other words, Elastic Net shines when you have a lot of correlated predictors and need a balance of feature selection and shrinkage. But if that's not your situation, you might be overcomplicating things for no reason. So while Elastic Net is a powerful tool, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. The key is knowing when to use it and when to go with something simpler. And speaking of that, the next big question is, how do you actually train an Elastic Net model step by step? What does the workflow look like in practice? That's exactly what we're diving into next. Now that we understand when to use Elastic Net and when it might not be the best fit, it's time to build an Elastic Net model step by step. Because theory is great, but unless you can actually apply this in a real project, it's just another fancy concept floating around in your head. So here's the roadmap. First, data preparation, because if your data isn't clean, even the best algorithm won't save you. Before using Elastic Net, we need to standardize the features. Unlike decision trees or deep learning models that can handle raw input, Elastic Net is sensitive to scale. If one predictor has values in the thousands and another in decimal points, the algorithm will unfairly favor the larger scale variable. So we need to normalize or standardize the data to bring everything to a comparable range. Next, splitting the data. You wouldn't test a new workout routine by only looking at how well you did in the first week, right? Same thing with machine learning. We divide the dataset into training and testing sets, usually 80-20 or 70-30, so we can train the model on one portion and evaluate its performance on fresh, unseen data. Then comes model fitting, where we actually apply Elastic Net. But here's where things get interesting. Elastic Net doesn't work out of the box like linear regression. We need to tune two key hyperparameters, the regularization strength, lambda, and the balance between Lasso and ridge, alpha. Instead of guessing, we use cross-validation to systematically test different values and find the best combination. This ensures that our model isn't just memorizing the training data, but actually generalizing well. After tuning, we evaluate the model. The most common metric for regression models is mean squared error, MSE, which tells us how far off our predictions are on average. We might also look at R-squared, which measures how much of the variation in the data our model explains. If our error is high or our R-squared is low, it means we either over-regularized, removed too much information, or under-regularized, kept too much noise. Finally, we interpret the results. Unlike deep learning, where it's often hard to explain how a model makes decisions, Elastic Net gives us interpretable coefficients. We can look at which predictors have the biggest impact, which ones got shrunk, and how the model handles correlated variables. This makes it a great choice when you need transparency, like in finance, healthcare, or scientific research. So that's the full workflow: data prep, splitting, model fitting, hyperparameter tuning, evaluation, and interpretation. But enough talking about the steps. Let's actually see them in action. In the next section, we'll walk through an implementation in Python so you can follow along and build your own Elastic Net model from scratch. Now that we know the step-by-step process for implementing Elastic Net, it's time to see it in action. We're going hands-on with a real-world example using Python. If you've ever struggled with regression models picking up too much noise or not knowing which variables truly matter, this is where things get real. First things first, setting up the environment. We need to make sure we have the right libraries installed. The key one here is scikit-learn, which gives us an easy-to-use implementation of Elastic Net. So if you haven't already, you'll need to install it using pip install scikit-learn. Once that's done, we import everything we need. NumPy for numerical operations, pandas for handling datasets, and of course Elastic Net from scikit-learn. Next, we load and prepare the dataset. Let's say we're working with a housing price dataset. We have features like square footage, number of bedrooms, location, year built, and maybe even weird ones like how fancy the kitchen backsplash is. But before we do anything, we standardize the data because remember, Elastic Net is sensitive to scale. If one feature has values in the thousands and another in decimal places, the model will be biased toward the larger numbers. So we use standard scaler from scikit-learn to transform everything into a uniform scale. Now comes the important part, splitting the data. We divide it into a training set and a test set using an 80-20 or 70-30 split. The training set helps our model learn, while the test set makes sure we're not just overfitting. If our model performs well on training data but flops on new data, we know we've gone too far with regularization or haven't tuned our hyperparameters correctly. Then we fit the Elastic Net model. But we're not just throwing random values at it. We need to tune the lambda, regularization strength, and alpha balance between Lasso and Ridge. Instead of guessing, we use grid search cross-validation, which systematically tests different combinations of hyperparameters and finds the best one for our dataset. This ensures that we're not underfitting or overfitting. Once our model is trained, it's time for evaluation. We calculate mean squared error, MSE, to measure how far off our predictions are, and R-squared to see how well our model explains the variance in the data. If MSE is high, it means our predictions are off, and we need to fine-tune our lambda and alpha values. If R-squared is low, it means the model isn't capturing enough of the important patterns in the data. Finally, we interpret the results. Unlike deep learning models that are often black boxes, Elastic Net gives us coefficients that show which features are actually contributing to the predictions. If a feature's coefficient is exactly 0, Elastic Net removed it from the model. If it's small but not 0, ridge regularization shrunk its impact. This is super useful in industries where you need to justify decisions, like explaining to a bank why someone's credit score is low, or to a hospital why a certain factor influences disease risk. And that's it. The full Elastic Net workflow in Python. From data preparation to tuning, training, and evaluation, this is how you build a stable, interpretable regression model that can handle large data sets with multicollinearity. But Elastic Net isn't just limited to Python. What if you're working in R? That's exactly what we're tackling next. Let's keep going. Fine, we've seen how to implement Elastic Net in Python, but what if you're working in R? No worries, we've got you covered. R is widely used in statistics and data science, especially in academic research and financial modeling. And the good news? Implementing Elastic Net in R is just as straightforward. First, we need to set up the environment. The main package we'll be using is GelMNet, which provides a powerful and efficient implementation of Lasso, Ridge, and Elastic Net regression. If you haven't installed it yet, you can do that using install.packages, GLMNet. Once that's done, we load the necessary libraries, GLMNet for the model, Caret for cross-validation, and Tidyverse for data manipulation. Next, we load and prepare the dataset. Let's say we're working with customer spending behavior. We have features like age, income, shopping frequency, and loyalty program membership. Just like in Python, we need to standardize the data before running Elastic Net. We use scale to normalize the predictor variables, ensuring that no single feature dominates the model due to differences in scale. Now, we split the data into a training set and a testing set. We use the createData partition function from Caret to randomly divide the dataset, keeping 80% for training and 20% for testing. This ensures that our model learns on one subset of the data, but is evaluated on unseen data to check for overfitting. Then we train the Elastic Net model using GLMNet. The function takes in our predictor matrix and response variable and allows us to specify alpha and lambda. Remember, alpha controls the balance between Lasso and Ridge. If alpha is 1, it behaves like Lasso. If it's 0, it behaves like Ridge. If it's in between, we get Elastic Net. Instead of guessing the best lambda, we use cv.glmnet, which performs cross-validation to find the optimal penalty strength that minimizes error. After training, we evaluate the model using common metrics. The most important one is root mean squared error, RMSE, which tells us how far off our predictions are. We can also look at R-squared to see how much of the variance in our target variable is explained by the model. If RMSE is high, it means our predictions aren't great, and we may need to adjust lambda or alpha. If R² is low, the model isn't capturing enough patterns from the data, meaning we might need to retune it. Finally, we interpret the results. One of the best things about Elastic Net is that it allows us to see which predictors are actually contributing to the model. We can extract the coefficients using coef, CV model, s marks lambda.nmin, which shows us which features have been retained and how much impact they have on predictions. If a coefficient is 0, Elastic Net has removed that feature, indicating that it wasn't useful. And that's it. Elastic Net in R from start to finish. We prepared the data, standardized it, split it, trained the model, tuned the hyperparameters, evaluated its performance, and extracted meaningful insights. Whether you're using Python or R, Elastic Net is an incredibly powerful tool for handling large datasets, multicollinearity, and feature selection. But we're not stopping here. The next big challenge is hyperparameter tuning, because finding the right values for alpha and lambda can make or break your model. So let's dive into how to optimize these parameters for the best results. Now that we know how to implement Elastic Net in both Python and R, let's talk about something crucial, hyperparameter tuning. Because here's the thing, Elastic Net isn't a plug-and-play model. If you just pick random values for alpha and lambda, you're basically shooting in the dark, and your model will either overfit, underfit, or just be plain bad. But don't worry, because I'm going to show you how to properly tune these parameters and get the best performance possible. First, let's break it down. Elastic Net has two key hyperparameters, lambda and alpha. Lambda controls the overall strength of the regularization, while alpha determines the balance between Lasso and Ridge. If you get these wrong, your model either becomes too simple and misses important patterns, or becomes too complex and memorizes noise. That's why tuning is so important. So how do we find the best values? The answer is cross-validation. Instead of guessing, we systematically test different combinations of lambda and alpha to see which ones produce the lowest error. The most common method is k-fold cross-validation, where we split our dataset into multiple subsets, train on some, validate on others, and repeat the process multiple times. This helps us find the optimal hyperparameters that generalize well to new data. There are two main ways to do this: grid search and random search. Grid search systematically tries all possible combinations within a specified range. It's thorough but computationally expensive, especially for large datasets. Random search, on the other hand, picks a random subset of values to test, making it faster while still often finding a good solution. Some advanced methods even use Bayesian optimization, which intelligently selects hyperparameter values based on previous results to speed up the process. In Python, we use grid search CV from scikit-learn or randomized search CV to perform this tuning. In R, we use cv.glmnet, which automatically finds the best lambda by testing multiple values and selecting the one that minimizes cross-validation error. Once we've tuned these parameters, we evaluate the final model on our test set using performance metrics like mean squared error, MSE, and R² to ensure that our model is both accurate and interpretable. If the results still aren't great, we might need to go back and refine our feature selection, try different ranges for lambda and alpha, or experiment with additional pre-processing techniques. Hyperparameter tuning is what separates an average model from an exceptional one. If you get it right, you'll have a well-regularized, high-performing, and interpretable Elastic Net model that can handle high-dimensional data like a pro. And now that we know how to optimize our model, let's take things one step further. How does Elastic Net compare to other regularization techniques like pure Lasso or Ridge? That's exactly what we're tackling next. We've fine-tuned Elastic Net, but the real question is, how does it stack up against Lasso and Ridge? Because if you're solving a machine learning problem, you don't just pick Elastic Net because it sounds sophisticated. You need to know when it actually outperforms its simpler alternatives and when you might be better off using Lasso or Ridge instead. Lasso, or Least Absolute Shrinkage and Selection Operator, is a go-to for feature selection. It forces some coefficients to exactly zero, which means it effectively eliminates irrelevant features from the model. That's a huge advantage when you're working with high-dimensional data where many variables are just noise. But Lasso has a serious weakness. It struggles with correlated predictors. If two or more variables are closely related, Lasso tends to pick just one and discard the others, even if they contain useful information. That's where Elastic Net steps in. Instead of making an arbitrary choice, it allows groups of correlated features to be included together, ensuring that valuable information isn't lost. On the other side, there's ridge regression. Ridge doesn't eliminate any variables at all. It shrinks all coefficients, reducing their influence without setting them to zero. This makes it ideal when every predictor contains some useful information, even if only a little. Ridge stabilizes the model and prevents large swings in coefficient values. But the downside is that it never simplifies the model. It keeps all predictors, even the irrelevant ones. If you're dealing with hundreds or thousands of variables, this can lead to an unnecessarily complex model that's harder to interpret. Elastic Net solves this problem by blending Ridge's coefficient shrinkage with Lasso's feature selection, giving you the best of both worlds. So, when do you actually use Elastic Net instead of its competitors? If your dataset has many predictors, and some of them are highly correlated, Elastic Net is your best bet. It prevents Lasso's aggressive feature elimination while avoiding Ridge's tendency to keep everything. If your dataset has only a few independent predictors, Lasso might be enough. If you know that all your predictors contribute to the model in some way, Ridge might be the better choice. Lasso is like a strict minimalist, getting rid of anything that doesn't stand out. Ridge is the hoarder, keeping everything but organizing it neatly. Elastic Net, it's the smart middle ground. It removes only what's truly unnecessary while keeping related predictors in check. But this is just theory. What happens when we apply Elastic Net to real-world problems? That's what's next. Let's start with finance, where Elastic Net helps banks predict credit risk, optimize portfolios, and model stock market trends. Finance is a world of numbers, patterns, and risk. Every decision, whether it's investing in stocks, approving a loan, or predicting economic trends, relies on data. But here's the problem. Financial data sets are massive, complex, and full of highly correlated variables. Traditional regression models struggle to make sense of these relationships without overfitting. This is exactly where Elastic Net becomes a game changer. One of the most powerful applications of Elastic Net in finance is credit scoring. Banks and financial institutions need to predict the likelihood of a borrower defaulting on a loan. They have access to a huge number of variables: income, spending habits, debt-to-income ratio, number of credit cards, past missed payments, and even transaction history. Some of these features carry overlapping information. Traditional models like Lasso might drop certain variables entirely, while Ridge would keep all of them, even the irrelevant ones. Elastic Net finds the right balance. It keeps only the most important predictors while still accounting for correlated financial behaviors. Another major use case is risk management. Financial markets are unpredictable, influenced by countless factors like interest rates, global trade policies, and investor sentiment. Many of these factors are interconnected. A change in oil prices affects airline stocks, which in turn influences transportation and logistics sectors. A simple regression model either ignores these relationships or overcomplicates them. Elastic Net allows financial analysts to build more stable and interpretable risk models by selecting the right mix of correlated variables, ensuring that no key predictor is left behind, And then there's portfolio optimization. Investment funds and hedge funds don't just throw money at stocks randomly. They analyze historical performance, volatility, correlations between assets, and macroeconomic indicators to determine the best portfolio mix. In traditional portfolio selection models, choosing the best predictors can be tricky. If two stocks move together, do we consider one and ignore the other, or do we keep both? Elastic Net helps by preserving groups of correlated investments instead of arbitrarily removing important signals. Welcome to the new era of video creation with Jog AI. Simply type your script to get started. Understanding the human genome is one of the biggest challenges in modern science. DNA contains billions of genetic codes, and buried within them are the secrets to diseases, traits, and even life expectancy. But here's the problem. Genomic datasets are massive and highly correlated. Thousands of genes can be interacting at the same time, making it incredibly difficult to pinpoint which ones are truly important. This is where Elastic Net becomes a game changer. One of the most critical applications is gene expression analysis. Scientists study which genes are turned on or off in different conditions, like cancerous versus healthy cells. The challenge? Gene expression data is often high-dimensional with more variables than observations. A standard regression model would collapse under the weight of too many features. Lasso might remove too many genes, and Ridge would keep everything, even the noise. Elastic Net, however, finds the balance, selecting only relevant genes while preserving groups of correlated ones. Another powerful use case is biomarker discovery. Identifying genetic markers linked to diseases is critical for early diagnosis and targeted therapies. Traditional methods struggle with the complexity of genetic interactions, but Elastic Net allows researchers to isolate key genetic signals while avoiding redundant predictors. This makes it easier to find which genes are truly influencing disease risk. Elastic Net is also transforming polygenic risk scoring, a method used to predict an individual's likelihood of developing conditions like heart disease or diabetes. Instead of relying on a single gene, scientists can now analyze thousands of genetic variations at once, with Elastic Net ensuring that only the most predictive and stable markers are included. And it doesn't stop at genes. Elastic Net is now being used to integrate multi-omics data, a fancy way of saying it helps scientists combine genetics, proteins, and metabolic information to get a full picture of biological systems. This is revolutionizing precision medicine, where treatments are tailored to a person's unique genetic profile. Genomics isn't the only field being transformed by Elastic Net. Next, we move into marketing, where businesses use it to predict customer behavior, optimize campaigns, and turn data into profit. Marketing today isn't just about catchy slogans and flashy ads. It's driven by data. Every click, every purchase, every interaction generates valuable insights. The challenge? There's too much data, and much of it is highly correlated. Customer age, income, browsing habits, past purchases, many of these features overlap. Traditional regression models struggle to make sense of this complexity without overfitting. This is where Elastic Net gives marketers an edge. One of the biggest applications is customer segmentation. Businesses want to divide their audience into meaningful groups: high spenders, bargain hunters, repeat customers. The problem? Many demographic and behavioral features are closely related. Lasso might drop some important segments entirely, while Ridge keeps everything, even if it adds little value. Elastic Net finds the balance, allowing marketers to retain key customer segments while filtering out the noise. Another major use case is churn prediction. Companies don't just want to attract customers, they want to keep them. Elastic Net helps predict who is likely to leave by analyzing factors like engagement levels, purchase frequency, and customer service interactions. By selecting only the most important predictors, companies can pinpoint at-risk customers and take action before they leave. Marketing teams also use Elastic Net for campaign optimization. Imagine running a digital ad campaign. There are countless variables at play: ad design, time of day, target audience, device type. Many of these factors are correlated, making it hard to determine which truly drives conversions. Elastic Net cuts through the complexity, ensuring that budgets are spent on the strategies that actually work. The result? Smarter targeting, higher return on investment, and better customer retention. Elastic Net is turning marketing from an art into a science. Next, we take a deep dive into how Elastic Net is being used in healthcare, where predicting patient outcomes can literally be a matter of life and death. In healthcare, data isn't just about numbers, it's about saving lives. Every patient generates a massive amount of medical information, from lab results to genetic markers, vital signs, and lifestyle habits. But here's the challenge. Medical datasets are often huge, noisy, and full of correlated variables. Diagnosing diseases, predicting patient outcomes, and personalizing treatments all depend on extracting the right insights from complex data. This is where Elastic Net is making a real difference. One of the most groundbreaking applications is in early disease detection. Take diabetes, for example. Doctors look at dozens of risk factors: blood sugar levels, weight, family history, cholesterol. Many of these are highly correlated, which makes standard regression techniques struggle. Lasso might remove important predictors, and Ridge could keep too many, making the model hard to interpret. Elastic Net keeps only the most relevant predictors while preserving meaningful relationships, leading to more accurate diagnoses. Another powerful use case is predicting patient readmission rates. Hospitals need to know which patients are at the highest risk of coming back within 30 days. Too many readmissions mean worse patient outcomes and higher healthcare costs. Using Elastic Net, hospitals can analyze thousands of patient records, identifying the key risk factors that lead to repeat visits. This allows medical teams to intervene earlier, improving patient care and reducing hospital overcrowding. Elastic Net is also revolutionizing precision medicine. In cancer treatment, doctors use genetic testing to determine which therapies will work best for individual patients. The problem? Genetic data contains tens of thousands of variables, many of which are correlated. Elastic Net helps filter out the noise, identifying which biomarkers are truly predictive of treatment success. This is leading to more personalized and effective treatments, improving survival rates for diseases like cancer. The impact is huge: better diagnostics, more targeted treatments, and improved patient outcomes. And healthcare isn't the only industry seeing game-changing results. Next, we explore how Elastic Net is shaping the future of e-commerce, optimizing everything from pricing strategies to customer recommendations. E-commerce is all about understanding customers, what they want, when they want it, and how much they're willing to pay. Every search, every click, every abandoned cart tells a story. But with thousands of products, millions of users, and constantly shifting trends, making sense of all this data is a massive challenge. That's where Elastic Net is giving online retailers a serious advantage. One of the biggest applications is dynamic pricing. Ever notice how airline tickets, hotel rooms, and even Amazon prices fluctuate based on demand? Retailers use machine learning models to predict the optimal price for each product at any given moment. The challenge? Pricing is influenced by many overlapping factors: seasonality, competitor prices, customer demographics. Traditional models either overfit or miss key insights. Elastic Net keeps the strongest predictors while accounting for correlations, helping companies set the perfect price to maximize sales and profits. Another game changer is recommendation systems. Platforms like Netflix, Spotify, and Amazon don't just suggest products randomly, they use machine learning to predict what you're most likely to buy or watch next. But here's the issue. Customer preferences are complex. If someone buys running shoes, does that mean they want more shoes, workout gear, or nutrition supplements? Many recommendation features are correlated, and simple models can make poor predictions. Elastic Net filters out weak predictors while keeping related features, ensuring more relevant recommendations and higher engagement. E-commerce companies also rely on Elastic Net for customer churn prediction. Losing a customer is expensive. Companies invest heavily in acquiring users, so they need to know who's about to leave and why. Using Elastic Net, businesses can analyze factors like purchase history, customer service interactions, and browsing behavior to predict churn risk early. Instead of treating all customers the same, they can send targeted offers or personalized emails to keep them engaged. The result? Smarter pricing, better recommendations, and higher customer retention. Elastic Net is helping online businesses turn data into real revenue, but its power doesn't stop here. In the next section, we dive into how Elastic Net is used in time series analysis, where making accurate predictions is all about spotting patterns in historical data. Predicting the future is tough, but in many industries it's absolutely essential. Whether it's forecasting stock prices, demand for electricity, or website traffic, businesses rely on time series analysis to make informed decisions. The challenge? Time series data is often highly correlated, noisy, and affected by external factors. Traditional regression models struggle to handle this complexity without overfitting or missing key patterns. This is where Elastic Net steps in. One of the most powerful applications is in financial market forecasting. Stock prices don't move randomly. They are influenced by interest rates, inflation, earnings reports, and global events. Many of these predictors are correlated, making it difficult to determine which factors truly drive price movements. Lasso might throw away important signals, while Ridge could keep everything, adding unnecessary noise. Elastic Net finds the right balance, selecting only the most influential economic indicators while maintaining stability in predictions. Another major use case is in demand forecasting. Companies need to anticipate how much inventory to stock, how many workers to schedule, and when demand spikes will happen, whether it's retail stores predicting holiday sales or airlines estimating ticket demand. Businesses use historical data to make these decisions. Elastic Net helps by filtering out weak predictors while keeping related features, such as seasonal trends and economic indicators, intact. Elastic Net is also being used in healthcare for epidemic prediction. Hospitals and public health agencies need to forecast disease outbreaks, from seasonal flu to global pandemics. The number of new cases, hospitalization rates, and even social behaviors all play a role. Many of these variables are correlated, and traditional models struggle to separate meaningful patterns from noise. Elastic Net ensures that only the most predictive factors are used, leading to more accurate outbreak models and better resource planning. Time series forecasting isn't just about predicting the future, it's about making better decisions today. Elastic Net is proving to be a powerful tool for handling complex correlated data while maintaining model stability. But time series isn't the only field where this approach is making waves. Up next, we explore how Elastic Net is being used in image processing, where extracting patterns from high-dimensional data is key. Images aren't just pictures, they're data-rich matrices filled with thousands, sometimes millions, of pixels. From medical scans to facial recognition, image processing relies on machine learning to detect patterns, recognize objects, and extract meaningful information. The challenge? Image data is extremely high-dimensional and many pixel values are correlated. Traditional regression models simply can't handle this complexity. That's where Elastic Net becomes a powerful tool. One of the biggest applications is in medical imaging. Take MRI scans, for example. Doctors need to identify patterns that indicate diseases like tumors or neurological disorders. Each scan contains hundreds of thousands of pixels, and many of them carry overlapping information. Lasso might eliminate useful pixel groupings, while Ridge would keep everything, including irrelevant noise. Elastic Net provides the perfect balance, ensuring that only the most relevant image features are used for diagnosis. Another major use case is in facial recognition and biometrics. Security systems rely on machine learning to identify individuals from images or video feeds. The problem? Faces are highly structured, meaning pixels near each other are strongly correlated. If a model doesn't handle this properly, it might overfit to shadows, lighting conditions, or minor distortions. Elastic Net helps by reducing noise while keeping key facial landmarks intact, leading to more reliable recognition systems. Elastic Net is also being used in satellite image analysis. Governments and environmental agencies use satellite images to track climate change, deforestation, and urban growth. These images contain millions of pixels, many of which are redundant or correlated due to atmospheric conditions. Traditional models struggle with the scale, but Elastic Net filters out non-essential information while preserving the patterns that matter, helping scientists monitor changes on Earth with greater accuracy. The power of Elastic Net in image processing comes down to its ability to select important features while maintaining stability, a perfect solution when working with high-dimensional correlated data. But image analysis isn't the only field benefiting from this technique. Up next, we explore how Elastic Net is transforming natural language processing, helping machines understand and analyze human text like never before. Text might look simple on the surface, but for machines, it's a complex maze of words, phrases, and hidden meanings. From chatbots to sentiment analysis, natural language processing, NLP, helps computers understand and analyze human language. The challenge? Text data is high-dimensional, and many words or phrases are closely correlated. Traditional regression models can't handle this complexity without overfitting or missing important patterns. That's where Elastic Net is making a big impact. One of its most powerful applications is sentiment analysis. Businesses want to understand how customers feel about their products based on reviews, tweets, and comments. The problem? A single review can have hundreds of words, and many of them convey similar meanings. Lasso might remove too many relevant words, while Ridge keeps all words, including ones that add no real value. Elastic Net keeps the most meaningful words while filtering out noise, improving sentiment prediction accuracy. Another major use case is spam detection. Email providers use machine learning to separate real messages from spam. Spam emails often contain predictable patterns of words, but these words can appear in different combinations. A model that drops too many features might miss new spam variations, while one that keeps everything might flag important emails by mistake. Elastic Net allows models to adapt by selecting only the strongest predictors of spam, keeping inboxes cleaner without unnecessary filtering. Elastic Net is also being used in document classification. News agencies, search engines, and legal firms need to automatically categorize documents based on content. Many words in different categories are related, which makes feature selection tricky. Instead of throwing out useful word groups, Elastic Net preserves key terms that define each category, leading to more accurate document classification models. Text data is messy, complex, and often overwhelming, but Elastic Net makes it manageable and interpretable. By combining feature selection with stability, it allows NLP models to focus on the most relevant words while avoiding overfitting. Up next, we shift from training models to evaluating them, because knowing how to measure a model's performance is just as important as building it. Building a model is just the first step. Evaluating it properly is what makes it truly useful. A model that looks great on training data but fails in the real world is completely useless. That's why we need to measure performance objectively, ensuring that our Elastic Net model isn't just memorizing data, but actually learning patterns that generalize well. The first and most common metric is mean squared error, MSE. This tells us how far off our predictions are on average. The lower the MSE, the better our model is at minimizing errors. But MSE alone doesn't tell the whole story. A low MSE on training data, but a high MSE on test data means the model is overfitting, learning noise instead of true patterns. That's where cross-validation comes in. Instead of testing on just one split of the data, we divide the dataset into multiple parts, train on some, and test on others. This prevents random luck from influencing the results and gives us a more realistic measure of performance. We also look at R squared, R2, which measures how much of the variance in the data is explained by the model. A higher R2 means the model is doing a better job at capturing patterns. But be careful, R2 can sometimes be misleading if the model is too complex. A model with too many predictors might have a high R2, but still fail when tested on new data. Another important check is feature importance and stability. Unlike deep learning models, Elastic Net provides interpretable coefficients that show which predictors are truly driving the results. If a model assigns wildly different weights to similar predictors every time we retrain it, that's a sign that it might not be stable. We want a model where important features remain consistent across different training runs. Finally, we check for bias-variance trade-off. If a model is too simple, it has high bias and underfits. If it's too complex, it has high variance and overfits. Elastic Net is designed to balance this trade-off, but we still need to fine-tune our lambda and alpha values to get it just right. Evaluating a model is just as important as training it. If we don't measure performance properly, we can't trust the predictions it makes. Next, we move into interpreting Elastic Net coefficients, where we break down how to actually understand the numbers our model produces. Numbers on a screen don't mean much unless we know how to read them. One of the biggest advantages of Elastic Net over black box models like deep learning is that it provides interpretable coefficients, allowing us to understand exactly which features impact predictions. But reading these coefficients isn't always as simple as it looks. First, let's start with the basics. Each feature in the dataset has a coefficient, a number that tells us how much it contributes to the prediction. A positive coefficient means that increasing that feature increases the target variable, while a negative coefficient means the opposite. If a coefficient is exactly 0, Elastic Net has determined that the feature isn't useful and has removed it from the model. But unlike ordinary regression, Elastic Net shrinks coefficients, meaning the values are lower than they would be in an unregularized model. This is intentional. It prevents any single feature from dominating the prediction and keeps the model stable. If two predictors are highly correlated, Elastic Net spreads their influence across both instead of arbitrarily picking one, unlike Lasso, which would drop one entirely. The key to interpretation is looking at which features remain and how strongly they influence the outcome. Let's say we're predicting house prices, and Elastic Net assigns high positive coefficients to square footage and location, but shrinks the coefficient for the number of bathrooms to almost 0. This tells us that square footage and location are far more important than the number of bathrooms when determining a house's price. Another way to validate coefficients is through stability analysis. We can retrain the model multiple times using different subsets of data. If important features consistently receive similar coefficients, the model is stable. If coefficients change drastically between training runs, it might indicate that the regularization parameters need adjusting. Interpreting Elastic Net coefficients isn't just about numbers, it's about extracting insights. By understanding which features the model relies on, we can make more informed business decisions, optimize strategies, and even uncover hidden relationships in the data. Now that we know how to read the model's outputs, let's dive into the next step: how Elastic Net works alongside feature engineering to create even better models. A model is only as good as the data it's trained on. No matter how advanced Elastic Net is, if we feed it messy, irrelevant or poorly structured data, it won't perform well. That's where feature engineering comes into play. By transforming raw data into more meaningful representations, we can help Elastic Net make better predictions while keeping the model interpretable and stable. One of the most important steps is handling categorical variables. Many datasets include non-numeric data, like customer demographics, job titles, or product categories. Machine learning models can't work with raw text, so we need to convert these into numerical values. One-hot encoding creates new binary columns for each category, but this can lead to high-dimensional data, which Elastic Net is perfect for handling. If we have too many categories, Elastic Net will automatically shrink or remove the least useful ones. Another key aspect of feature engineering is interaction terms. Sometimes relationships between features matter more than the features themselves. For example, in predicting house prices, the interaction between square footage and location might be more predictive than either feature alone. Elastic Net can help identify which interactions are actually important, preventing unnecessary complexity. Feature scaling is also critical. Elastic Net is sensitive to the scale of input data, meaning features with larger values, like income in dollars, can dominate smaller valued features, like interest rates in percentages. Standardizing the data by ensuring all features have a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1 ensures that no single variable skews the model's learning process. Dimensionality reduction techniques like principal component analysis, PCA, can also complement Elastic Net. If a dataset has thousands of correlated features, PCA can transform them into a smaller set of uncorrelated components, and Elastic Net can then determine which components are truly valuable for prediction. A well-engineered dataset can make or break a model. Feature engineering helps Elastic Net focus on the right information, improving both performance and interpretability. Up next, we explore how Elastic Net compares to other model selection techniques and when it's truly the best choice. Choosing the right model is one of the most critical decisions in machine learning. With so many techniques available, linear regression, decision trees, neural networks, and more, it's important to understand when Elastic Net is truly the best option, because while it's powerful, it's not always the right fit. Elastic Net shines when dealing with high-dimensional data, especially when there are more predictors than observations. Traditional regression models break down in these situations, either overfitting to noise or failing to capture meaningful patterns. If a dataset has a lot of correlated features, Elastic Net is one of the few techniques that can handle it effectively, keeping groups of related predictors rather than arbitrarily selecting one and discarding the others. But Elastic Net isn't always the answer. If the dataset has only a few predictors, plain linear regression might be sufficient. If feature selection isn't a priority and every variable contributes useful information, ridge regression might be a better choice, as it stabilizes coefficients without removing features. And if the goal is aggressive feature selection with a sparse model, Lasso can be more effective. For nonlinear relationships, Elastic Net might not be the best option at all. Techniques like decision trees, random forests, or gradient boosting can capture complex interactions and nonlinear patterns better than any linear model. Similarly, if a problem involves unstructured data like images or text, deep learning methods like convolutional neural networks, CNNs, or transformers may outperform Elastic Net. That's why model selection isn't just about picking the most advanced algorithm. It's about understanding the data and the problem at hand. Elastic Net is ideal when dealing with structured, high-dimensional, and correlated data where feature selection and interpretability are key. But for problems requiring deep pattern recognition or highly nonlinear interactions, other models might be a better fit. Selecting the right model is just one piece of the puzzle. The next step, validating Elastic Net's performance with cross-validation, ensuring that our chosen model isn't just performing well on training data, but can actually generalize to new unseen data. Building a model is one thing, but making sure it actually works in the real world, that's where cross-validation comes in. If we don't properly test our Elastic Net model, we risk overfitting, meaning it performs great on training data, but completely fails on new, unseen data. Cross-validation helps prevent that by ensuring our model generalizes well. The most commonly used method is k-fold cross-validation. Instead of training on just one chunk of data and testing on another, we split the dataset into k equal parts, or folds. The model is trained on k1 of them and tested on the remaining one. This process repeats k times, each time using a different fold as the test set. The final performance is averaged across all runs, giving a much more reliable estimate of how well the model will perform in the real world. Cross-validation is particularly important for Elastic Net because of hyperparameter tuning. Remember, we need to select the best values for lambda, regularization strength, and alpha, lasso versus ridge balance. If we don't validate properly, we might pick values that work great on the training data but fail elsewhere. By using cross-validation, we ensure that our chosen parameters lead to consistent and stable performance. Another useful variation is leave-one-out cross-validation, LOOCV. This is an extreme case where we train the model on all data points except one, test on the excluded point, and repeat for every observation in the dataset. This is computationally expensive but useful when working with small datasets, ensuring that we make the most of limited data. Cross-validation isn't just a best practice, it's essential for building trustworthy models. Without it, we risk creating a model that looks good on paper but completely fails in production. Now that we know how to properly validate Elastic Net, let's explore how it can be used in combination with Ensemble Methods to create even more powerful predictive models. Sometimes a single model isn't enough. Even the best Elastic Net model has its limits. It assumes a linear relationship between variables and can struggle with highly complex, nonlinear patterns. That's where Ensemble Methods come in. By combining multiple models, we can improve accuracy, stability, and generalization, creating a more robust predictive system. One powerful approach is Elastic Net with bagging, bootstrap aggregating. In this method, multiple Elastic Net models are trained on different subsets of the data, and their predictions are averaged to reduce variance. This helps smooth out fluctuations caused by overfitting to specific training samples, making the final model more stable. Bagging is particularly useful when working with small datasets, where a single model might be overly sensitive to outliers. Another popular technique is Elastic Net with boosting. Unlike bagging, where models are trained independently, boosting trains models sequentially, correcting the mistakes of the previous ones. Algorithms like gradient boosting machines, GBM, and XGBoost can incorporate Elastic Net as a base learner, allowing it to select important features while boosting predictive power. This is especially useful in finance and marketing, where identifying subtle patterns in high-dimensional data can give companies a competitive edge. Elastic Net can also play a role in stacking, an advanced ensemble technique where multiple models such as Elastic Net, decision trees, and neural networks are combined using a meta-model that learns how to weight their predictions. If Elastic Net captures linear relationships, while another model captures nonlinear interactions, stacking ensures that we get the best of both worlds. Ensemble methods allow Elastic Net to go beyond its linear limitations, boosting performance while maintaining interpretability, but managing large datasets with ensemble models requires significant computing power. Up next, we explore how Elastic Net is applied to big data problems, ensuring scalability without sacrificing accuracy. Data is growing at an insane rate. From social media interactions to financial transactions, businesses and researchers are dealing with terabytes or even petabytes of data. The challenge? Traditional machine learning models, including Elastic Net, weren't originally built for such massive datasets. But with the right optimizations, Elastic Net can be scaled to handle big data problems efficiently. One of the biggest bottlenecks in large-scale Elastic Net modeling is computational cost, since Elastic Net solves an optimization problem that involves both L1, Lasso, and L2 ridge penalties. It requires more processing power than standard regression models. When dealing with millions of features, training time can quickly become unmanageable. That's why modern implementations use distributed computing frameworks like Apache Spark's MLlib, which parallelizes computations across multiple machines, allowing Elastic Net to scale efficiently. Another key optimization is sparse data structures. In big data environments, datasets often have thousands or millions of features, many of which are zero or irrelevant. Instead of storing and computing on every feature, sparse matrix representations help ElasticNet focus only on the important variables, dramatically reducing memory usage and computation time. Cloud-based machine learning platforms like Google Cloud AI, AWS SageMaker, and Microsoft Azure ML also provide ElasticNet as a scalable service, making it possible to train massive models without needing high-end local hardware. These platforms offer built-in hyperparameter tuning and distributed computing, ensuring that ElasticNet remains efficient even with massive datasets. Big data doesn't just mean more rows. It means more challenges in feature selection, storage, and computation. ElasticNet, when optimized for scale, remains one of the best choices for handling high-dimensional structured data while keeping the model interpretable and stable. But what happens when we move beyond just large data sets and start dealing with high-dimensional data where the number of features is far greater than the number of observations? That's exactly what we'll explore next. When working with data sets where the number of features is larger than the number of observations, traditional regression models break down. This is a common problem in genomics, finance, and text analysis, where datasets can have thousands or even millions of predictors, but only a limited number of samples. In these cases, overfitting is almost guaranteed, unless we use a method designed to handle high-dimensional data. That's where ElasticNet excels. In a standard linear regression model, when the number of predictors exceeds the number of data points, the model becomes unstable, producing wildly fluctuating coefficients. ElasticNet prevents this by applying regularization, shrinking less important coefficients, while selecting only the most relevant ones. This means that instead of being overwhelmed by too many variables, the model focuses on the ones that truly matter. One major advantage of ElasticNet in high-dimensional settings is grouped feature selection. Unlike Lasso, which arbitrarily selects one variable from a set of correlated predictors and discards the rest, ElasticNet ensures that related features are kept together. This is particularly important in fields like genomics, where multiple genes may contribute to a disease, or in finance, where multiple economic indicators move together. Another key benefit is robustness to noise. High-dimensional datasets are often filled with irrelevant variables that add complexity without improving predictive power. ElasticNet automatically filters out noisy predictors, improving the model's stability and interpretability. ElasticNet has proven to be one of the most effective tools for high-dimensional data problems, striking a balance between complexity and performance. But high-dimensional data often comes with another challenge: multicollinearity, where features are strongly correlated with each other. In the next section, we explore how ElasticNet handles multicollinearity better than standard regression techniques. When multiple features in a dataset are highly correlated, standard regression models start to break down. This problem, known as multicollinearity, makes it difficult to determine which predictor is truly influencing the outcome. If two variables move together, like salary and years of experience in a job market study, how do we decide which one is driving the trend? Traditional models struggle with this, but Elastic Net handles multicollinearity exceptionally well. Let's first look at what goes wrong in standard regression. In an ordinary least squares OLS model, when predictors are correlated, the coefficient estimates become unstable. Small changes in the data can cause huge swings in the coefficients, making the model unreliable. Lasso, while effective at feature selection, tends to randomly pick one correlated variable and drop the others, which might not be ideal if those features contain complementary information. Elastic Net takes a different approach. Because it combines L1 and L2 penalties, it doesn't just shrink coefficients, it shares influence between correlated variables instead of eliminating them outright. This means that if multiple predictors provide similar information, Elastic Net can distribute their importance more evenly rather than forcing a single variable to carry all the weight. A great example of this is in economic forecasting, where interest rates, inflation, and GDP growth are all intertwined. Instead of choosing just one variable and discarding the rest, Elastic Net keeps all relevant predictors, ensuring a more stable and reliable model. The ability to handle multicollinearity makes Elastic Net ideal for high-dimensional and structured datasets, where relationships between features are unavoidable. But datasets don't just have correlation issues. They can also suffer from sparsity, where many features contain mostly zeros or missing values. In the next section, we'll explore how Elastic Net deals with sparse data and why it's a powerful choice for these scenarios. Not all datasets are dense and filled with meaningful values. In many real-world scenarios, such as recommendation systems, genetics, and text analysis, we deal with sparse data, where most features contain zeros or missing values. Traditional regression models struggle in these situations, but Elastic Net is built to handle sparsity efficiently. Sparse datasets are common in recommendation systems. Imagine a movie streaming platform where users rate only a handful of films. Most users haven't rated every movie, leading to a dataset filled with missing or zero values. Standard regression would fail here, while Elastic Net selects only the most predictive features, ensuring that the model remains stable and effective. Another example is in genomics, where researchers analyze thousands of genes, but only a small subset is active or relevant to a given disease. A standard model might try to include all genes, leading to noise and overfitting. Elastic Net automatically eliminates non-informative genes while keeping correlated ones, making it a powerful tool for biological research. Elastic Net also excels in text analysis, where most words in a document's vocabulary never actually appear in a given text sample. With thousands of potential features, words, a naive model would be overwhelmed. Elastic Net helps by filtering out unnecessary words while keeping the most relevant ones for classification, sentiment analysis, or spam detection. The key advantage of Elastic Net in sparse data scenarios is its ability to select only the most useful features while maintaining stability, even when most variables contain zeros. But sparsity isn't the only issue that can make modeling difficult. Outliers can also distort predictions. Next, we explore how Elastic Net handles outliers, preventing them from wreaking havoc on our model's performance. Outliers, those extreme data points that don't follow the usual pattern, can seriously distort a model's predictions. Whether it's a sudden stock market crash, a customer making an abnormally large purchase, or an error in data entry, outliers can pull regression models in the wrong direction. The good news? Elastic Net is naturally resistant to outliers, but it's still important to understand how it handles them and when additional precautions might be needed. Traditional linear regression is highly sensitive to outliers because it tries to minimize squared errors. A single extreme data point can have a huge impact on coefficient estimates, making the model unreliable. Ridge regression is slightly better because it shrinks coefficients, reducing the effect of outliers. However, it doesn't remove irrelevant features, meaning that an outlier could still influence multiple correlated predictors. Lasso, on the other hand, forces some coefficients to zero, which helps remove features that might be heavily influenced by outliers. However, because Lasso doesn't allow grouped feature selection, it might remove one variable while keeping another that's still impacted by the outlier. This is where Elastic Net finds the right balance. It combines L1 and L2 penalties to reduce the effect of outliers while maintaining feature selection stability. That said, if a dataset contains extreme outliers, additional preprocessing might be necessary. Techniques like robust scaling, Windsorization, clipping extreme values, or log transformations can help make the data more stable before applying Elastic Net. While Elastic Net is more resistant to outliers than standard regression, no model is completely immune. It's always a good idea to visualize data, detect extreme values, and decide whether to adjust them before training a model. But outliers aren't the only thing that can distort a model's accuracy. Poor diagnostics can also lead to false confidence. Next, we explore how to diagnose an elastic net model, ensuring that it performs as expected. A model that looks good on paper isn't always good in practice. Before trusting an elastic net model, we need to diagnose its performance and check for potential issues like overfitting, underfitting, or unstable coefficients. Model diagnostics help ensure that Elastic Net is actually learning useful patterns rather than just memorizing noise. One of the most important diagnostics is residual analysis. Residuals are the differences between the actual values and the predictions. If Elastic Net is working correctly, the residuals should be randomly distributed around zero without clear patterns. If we see a systematic trend, like a curve or clustering, it means the model isn't fully capturing the relationships in the data, and we might need to add interaction terms or reconsider feature selection. Next, we check for multicollinearity issues using the variance inflation factor, VIF. Even though Elastic Net is designed to handle correlated features, extreme multicollinearity can still cause instability. If VIF values are high for certain predictors, we might need to adjust our alpha and lambda parameters, or drop redundant features manually. We also look at coefficient stability. If the same data set is split into different training and validation sets multiple times, do we get similar feature weights each time? If coefficient estimates vary drastically between runs, it could indicate that regularization is too weak or that some features don't have real predictive power. Another crucial check is learning curves, graphs that compare training and validation errors as the model complexity increases. If the training error is low, but the validation error is high, the model is overfitting. If both errors are high, it's underfitting, meaning the model is too simple to capture the patterns in the data. Tuning the lambda parameter can help strike the right balance. Diagnostics are a key part of trusting a model before deploying it. Without them, we risk making decisions based on flawed predictions. Now that we know how to test an Elastic Net model's accuracy, let's move to the next step: how to interpret and explain Elastic Net results to non-technical audiences. A model is only as valuable as the insights it provides. It's one thing to train a powerful Elastic Net model, but if stakeholders, executives, or non-technical teams don't understand what it's doing, its impact will be limited. The strength of Elastic Net isn't just in its predictive power, it's also in its interpretability. But how do we make sense of its results in a way that non-experts can understand? The first step is explaining feature importance. Unlike black box models like deep learning, Elastic Net gives us direct coefficients, showing how much each predictor contributes to the outcome. If a coefficient is positive, it increases the target variable. If negative, it decreases it. Instead of just listing numbers, we can visualize feature importance using bar charts or ranking tables, making it clear which factors drive predictions. We also need to explain why certain features were removed. Elastic Net automatically selects the most relevant variables while shrinking or eliminating the weak ones. Instead of just saying the model didn't use this feature, we can explain that the feature didn't add unique predictive power, either because it was redundant or because it had little impact on the target variable. Another key aspect is stability of results. If we retrain the model with slightly different data, do the same variables remain important? A stable model is one where the top predictors don't change drastically. If stakeholders see wildly different recommendations each time, they'll lose confidence in the model. Running multiple iterations and showing that key features remain consistent helps build trust. Context matters. If we're predicting customer churn, instead of saying the coefficient for engagement score is 0.5, we can say for every 10-point drop in engagement, the likelihood of churn increases by 5%. Framing results in business-friendly terms ensures that insights lead to real action. Elastic Net is one of the most interpretable machine learning techniques, but how we present its findings determines whether they are understood and applied. Now that we know how to explain model results, the next step is ensuring the model is valid and reliable before deploying it into production. Before an Elastic Net model is deployed, we need to be absolutely sure that it works not just in training, but in the real world. A model that looks great in development but fails when exposed to new data is a disaster waiting to happen. That's why validation is a critical step in the machine learning pipeline. One of the most important techniques is train-test splitting. We divide our data set into a training set where the model learns and a test set where we evaluate its performance. A well-performing model should have similar accuracy on both sets. If training accuracy is much higher than test accuracy, we're looking at overfitting, meaning the model memorized patterns instead of learning generalizable rules. Another key validation method is cross-validation. Instead of testing on a single holdout set, we use k-fold cross-validation, where the dataset is split into multiple subsets and the model is trained and tested repeatedly. This ensures our model's performance isn't accidentally inflated due to a lucky train-test split. We also check for data drift, the phenomenon where real-world data starts differing from the training data over time. A model predicting e-commerce trends might be trained on last year's behavior, but if consumer preferences shift, its accuracy will degrade. That's why ongoing validation and retraining are necessary to keep the model up to date. Finally, we validate the model's bias-variance trade-off. A high bias model oversimplifies the problem, leading to underfitting. A high variance model memorizes noise, leading to overfitting. Elastic Net is designed to balance this trade-off, but we fine-tune lambda and alpha to find the sweet spot. Validation ensures that our Elastic Net model isn't just theoretically sound, but ready for real-world application. Now that we've validated our model, it's time for the next big step, deploying Elastic Net into production and monitoring its long-term performance. Building a great model is one thing. Getting it to run in the real world is another challenge entirely. A machine learning model isn't just a static equation. It needs to be integrated, monitored, and maintained to stay effective over time. That's why deploying an Elastic Net model requires careful planning to ensure it works in production just as well as it did during training. The first step is choosing the deployment environment. Will the model run in a cloud-based system like AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure? Or will it be embedded into an on-premise application? Cloud-based deployment offers flexibility and scalability, while on-prem solutions might be necessary for industries like finance or healthcare, where data security is critical. Next, we need to automate predictions. A model isn't useful if it just sits in a Jupyter notebook, whether it's a financial firm using Elastic Net to predict loan risks or an e-commerce platform forecasting sales. The model needs to be integrated into a real-time or batch processing system. This means setting up APIs, scheduled jobs, or automated scripts that feed in new data and generate predictions continuously. Once deployed, monitoring performance is crucial. Even the best model will degrade over time as data patterns shift, a phenomenon known as model drift. A model predicting customer behavior today might not perform as well 6 months from now if shopping habits change. Regular performance checks, retraining schedules, and validation tests ensure that the model stays accurate. We also need a fallback strategy. What happens if the model suddenly produces unreliable predictions? Many production systems include a rule-based backup system or an older, more stable version of the model that can be used if needed. Deployment isn't just about putting a model into production, it's about keeping it accurate, reliable, and scalable. With the right infrastructure, Elastic Net models can continuously provide real-world value. Now that we've covered deployment, the next step is updating models over time, ensuring they stay relevant as new data becomes available. A machine learning model isn't a one-and-done project. It needs to evolve over time. As new data becomes available, consumer behavior shifts, or economic conditions change, a static model can quickly become outdated. That's why regular model updating is critical to keeping Elastic Net predictions accurate and reliable. One common approach is periodic retraining. This means updating the model at regular intervals, daily, weekly, or monthly, depending on how fast the underlying data changes. For example, an e-commerce recommendation model might need updates every few weeks, while a credit risk assessment model could require quarterly adjustments. But retraining alone isn't enough. We also need continuous model monitoring. This involves tracking key performance metrics like mean squared error, MSE, R squared, or classification accuracy over time. If the error rate starts creeping up or predictions deviate significantly from expectations, it's a sign that the model is drifting and needs to be updated. Another powerful technique is incremental learning, where the model is updated with new data without having to be retrained from scratch. This is especially useful in big data environments where retraining a full model on millions of records every day is impractical. In some cases, a complete feature re-evaluation is needed. If Elastic Net starts dropping features that were previously important or begins favoring different predictors, it could mean that the underlying relationships in the data have changed. Regular audits ensure that the model isn't just updating, but also adapting to new trends. Updating an Elastic Net model isn't just about keeping it running. It's about ensuring long-term accuracy and stability. Without updates, even the best model can become irrelevant. Now that we've covered model maintenance, let's talk about how Elastic Net enhances model interpretability, ensuring that decision makers can trust and act on its predictions. A model isn't useful if people don't understand how it works. One of the biggest strengths of Elastic Net is that it's highly interpretable compared to black box models like deep learning. But even though it provides readable coefficients, we still need to explain its decisions clearly to stakeholders, business leaders, and non-technical users. One of the best ways to interpret an Elastic Net model is through coefficient analysis. Since Elastic Net applies both L1 and L2 regularization, some features are shrunk close to zero, while others remain strong predictors. By examining the coefficient values, we can identify which features matter most. If a variable has a large positive coefficient, it has a strong positive impact on the prediction. If it has a negative coefficient, it lowers the predicted value. But not all coefficients are equal. Elastic Net distributes influence among correlated variables, meaning that even if two features seem weaker individually, they may still be important together. This is different from Lasso, which might arbitrarily drop one correlated variable entirely. Another tool for improving interpretability is feature importance ranking. Visualizing the top predictors in a bar chart or table makes it easier for non-technical audiences to understand the key drivers behind a prediction. For example, in a credit risk model, instead of saying lambda and alpha were tuned to optimize performance, we can say the top three factors influencing loan approval are income, credit history, and debt-to-income ratio. To further enhance trust in Elastic Net, we can use Shapley additive explanations values to show how much each predictor contributes to a specific prediction. SHAP values provide a more detailed breakdown of how Elastic Net weighs each feature on a case-by-case basis. Interpretability isn't just a nice-to-have, it's essential for building trust in machine learning models. Whether we're working in finance, healthcare, or marketing, decision makers need clear explanations before acting on a model's predictions. Now that we've covered interpretability, let's explore how Elastic Net helps us visualize regularization paths and understand how feature selection evolves. Understanding how Elastic Net selects features isn't just about looking at the final coefficients, it's about seeing how they evolve as the regularization strength changes. That's where regularization paths come in. These paths visually represent how each feature's coefficient behaves as we adjust the penalty parameters, helping us understand which variables remain important and which ones shrink to zero. The idea is simple. As we increase lambda, the regularization strength, Elastic Net gradually shrinks the coefficients of less important features. At high values of lambda, most coefficients are reduced to zero, leaving only the strongest predictors. A regularization path plot shows this process, with each line representing a different feature and its coefficient values shrinking as lambda increases. These plots help answer key questions. Which features are the first to be eliminated? If a predictor's coefficient drops to zero quickly, it wasn't a strong signal. Which features remain important even under strong regularization? These are the variables that have the most predictive power. Unlike Lasso, where features can disappear suddenly, Elastic Net allows for smoother transitions, meaning that correlated variables can shrink together instead of being arbitrarily removed. Regularization paths are especially useful for explaining model behavior to stakeholders. Instead of simply stating which features were selected, we can show how the model gradually refined its focus, filtering out weak variables while maintaining stability. Visualizing these paths also helps with hyperparameter tuning. If we see that key variables are shrinking too aggressively, we might need to adjust alpha or lambda to preserve more information. Regularization paths are a powerful way to see Elastic Net in action, making it clear how feature selection and coefficient shrinkage work together. Now that we understand how Elastic Net refines its predictions, let's dive into another major advantage: how it improves feature selection without sacrificing performance. One of the biggest challenges in machine learning is deciding which features actually matter. Too many variables can lead to overfitting, while too few can cause underfitting. Elastic Net provides a built-in solution by automatically selecting the most relevant predictors while keeping the model stable, making it one of the most effective feature selection methods available. Unlike ridge regression, which keeps all features but shrinks their coefficients, Elastic Net actually removes unimportant features by setting their coefficients to zero. At the same time, it avoids the problem of Lasso, which sometimes drops one important feature in favor of another correlated one. Instead of making an arbitrary choice, Elastic Net keeps groups of correlated variables, ensuring that no valuable information is lost. This makes it ideal for high-dimensional datasets where there are more predictors than observations. Whether we're dealing with genomic data, financial indicators, or customer behavior metrics, Elastic Net filters out irrelevant noise while preserving meaningful patterns. Feature selection with Elastic Net can also be adjusted based on how aggressively we regularize the model. By tuning the alpha parameter, we can control whether Elastic Net behaves more like Lasso, selecting fewer, more important features, or more like Ridge, keeping a larger number of useful predictors. This flexibility allows us to customize feature selection based on the specific needs of our problem. Another advantage of Elastic Net is that it provides interpretable models where we can easily see which features contribute to predictions. In contrast, black box models like neural networks might outperform Elastic Net in raw accuracy, but make it nearly impossible to explain why a certain prediction was made. Feature selection isn't just about improving accuracy, it's about creating models that are simpler, faster, and easier to interpret. Now that we know how Elastic Net selects the right features, let's talk about another key trade-off, how it balances model complexity and performance to avoid overfitting. A model should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. If a model is too complex, it memorizes noise instead of learning real patterns. If it's too simple, it misses important relationships in the data. Elastic Net helps us find the right balance by controlling model complexity through regularization. The key factor here is lambda, the regularization strength. A low lambda value results in a more complex model, keeping more features and allowing larger coefficients. A high lambda value makes the model simpler by shrinking coefficients and removing irrelevant predictors. The challenge is finding the sweet spot, where the model captures enough complexity to be useful, but not so much that it overfits. Elastic Net also prevents coefficient explosion. In standard regression models, when predictors are highly correlated, their coefficients can become very large, making the model unstable. By applying both L1, Lasso, and L2, Ridge penalties, Elastic Net keeps coefficients under control, reducing unnecessary complexity. Another important factor in model complexity is alpha, which determines the mix between Lasso and Ridge. If alpha is closer to 1, the model is more aggressive in reducing complexity, selecting only the most important features. If alpha is closer to 0, the model keeps more features but ensures they don't dominate the prediction. Adjusting alpha allows us to fine-tune how much complexity we want to allow in the model. Managing model complexity is especially important in high-stakes applications like finance, healthcare, and criminal justice, where overly complex models can be difficult to interpret and trust. By using Elastic Net, we ensure that our models remain stable, interpretable, and resistant to overfitting. Keeping complexity in check is one part of the puzzle, but what happens when we go too far? In the next section, we explore how Elastic Net helps prevent overfitting and ensures that our model generalizes well to new data. Overfitting is every data scientist's nightmare. It happens when a model learns too much from the training data, memorizing noise instead of discovering real patterns. The result? The model performs perfectly on training data, but fails miserably when tested on new, unseen data. Elastic Net helps solve this problem by introducing regularization, preventing the model from becoming too complex. The main way Elastic Net combats overfitting is through lambda, the regularization strength. When lambda is too low, the model fits too closely to the training data, capturing even small fluctuations that don't generalize well. When lambda is too high, the model becomes overly simplistic and ignores useful information. By tuning lambda carefully, often using cross-validation, we find the right balance, ensuring that the model learns meaningful patterns without overfitting. Another way Elastic Net prevents overfitting is through automatic feature selection. Lasso alone removes features aggressively, which can sometimes lead to underfitting by throwing out useful information. Ridge, on the other hand, keeps all features, which can lead to unnecessary complexity. Elastic Net blends both approaches, ensuring that we only keep features that genuinely contribute to predictive power while eliminating those that introduce noise. Elastic Net also helps in high-dimensional data, where the number of features far exceeds the number of observations. Without regularization, a model trained on high-dimensional data would almost always overfit because there are too many possible relationships to learn from. Elastic Net shrinks weak predictors and removes unnecessary ones, forcing the model to focus on only the strongest signals. A well-regularized Elastic Net model doesn't just fit the training data, it generalizes well to new data. This makes it one of the best choices for predictive modeling, especially in situations where interpretability and robustness matter. But preventing overfitting is just one challenge. In the next section, we explore the opposite problem, underfitting, and how Elastic Net helps avoid models that are too simplistic to be useful. While overfitting makes a model too complex, underfitting makes it too simple. An underfit model fails to capture the patterns in the data, leading to poor predictive performance. This usually happens when the model is too restricted, meaning it ignores useful information and oversimplifies relationships. Elastic Net helps prevent underfitting by providing the right level of flexibility in feature selection and coefficient shrinkage. One of the main causes of underfitting is excessive regularization. If the lambda value is too high, Elastic Net shrinks all coefficients too aggressively, making the model unable to learn meaningful relationships. The solution, tuning lambda carefully, typically using cross-validation, to ensure that the regularization is applied just enough to prevent overfitting, but not so much that the model becomes too simple. Another way Elastic Net helps prevent underfitting is through grouped feature selection. Lasso, on its own, removes some features too aggressively, sometimes discarding variables that actually matter just because they are correlated with others. Ridge keeps all features but shrinks them. Elastic Net finds the middle ground, allowing correlated features to stay while still enforcing sparsity where needed. This ensures that the model retains enough information to capture the full complexity of the data. Underfitting is especially dangerous in real-world applications where the cost of missing important patterns is high. In medical diagnosis, for example, an underfit model might ignore key symptoms that could help detect a disease. In finance, it might fail to recognize meaningful risk indicators. That's why Elastic Net's ability to balance simplicity and complexity makes it a powerful tool. It prevents overfitting without sacrificing too much predictive power. Preventing underfitting is about finding the right trade-off, keeping the model as simple as possible while still capturing enough patterns to make accurate predictions. But how do we quantify and optimize this balance? Next, we explore the bias-variance trade-off, a fundamental concept in machine learning that Elastic Net is specifically designed to handle. Every machine learning model faces a fundamental challenge, balancing bias and variance. If a model is too simple, it has high bias. It ignores important relationships and makes overly generalized predictions. If a model is too complex, it has high variance. It memorizes noise and performs well on training data, but poorly on unseen data. Elastic Net is designed to find the sweet spot between these two extremes. Bias refers to systematic errors in a model when it consistently makes incorrect predictions due to oversimplification. A high bias model might assume that all houses in a city cost the same, ignoring factors like location, size, and amenities. Ridge regression tends to have higher bias because it shrinks all coefficients, but doesn't remove any features entirely, which can lead to an overly simplistic model. Variance, on the other hand, refers to how much the model's predictions change based on small fluctuations in the training data. A high variance model fits the training set almost perfectly but fails on new data. Lasso can lead to higher variance because it aggressively removes features, which can sometimes discard valuable predictors that improve generalization. Elastic Net strikes the right balance between bias and variance by combining both L1 and L2 penalties. The L1 penalty, Lasso, ensures sparsity by removing unnecessary features, reducing variance. The L2 penalty, Ridge, prevents coefficients from becoming too large, reducing bias. By adjusting alpha, we control the mix of these penalties, allowing the model to be as simple as possible without losing predictive power. The best way to optimize the bias-variance trade-off is through cross-validation. By testing the model on multiple training and validation sets, we can fine-tune lambda and alpha to find the optimal level of regularization. The goal is a model that captures important patterns while still generalizing well to new data. Managing the bias-variance trade-off is essential for building stable, accurate, and reliable models. Next, we explore different cross-validation techniques that help fine-tune Elastic Net for maximum performance. Tuning a machine learning model isn't just guesswork. It requires systematic validation to ensure that the model performs well on new, unseen data. That's where cross-validation techniques come into play. Instead of relying on a single train test split, cross-validation allows us to test Elastic Net's performance on multiple subsets of data, ensuring better generalization and preventing overfitting. One of the most widely used methods is k-fold cross-validation. Here's how it works. The dataset is divided into k equal parts, folds. The model is trained on k1 folds, while the remaining fold is used for testing. This process repeats k times, with each fold serving as the test set once. The final performance is averaged across all runs, giving us a more reliable estimate of how the model will behave in real-world applications. For smaller datasets, leave one out cross-validation, low OCV, is an alternative approach. Instead of splitting the data into k folds, LOCV trains the model on all but one observation and tests it on the excluded data point. This process repeats for every data point, ensuring the model is tested on all available data. While LOCV provides a very precise validation, it can be computationally expensive, especially when working with large datasets. Another useful technique is stratified k-fold cross-validation, which ensures that each fold contains a balanced representation of different target classes. This is particularly helpful for imbalanced datasets, like detecting fraudulent transactions or rare medical conditions, where a standard train test split might result in skewed training distributions. Cross-validation is also essential for hyperparameter tuning. Instead of testing different lambda, regularization strength, and alpha L1, L2 mix values manually, we can automate this process using grid search or randomized search to systematically identify the best combination of hyperparameters. At the end of the day, cross-validation isn't just a best practice. It's an essential step in ensuring that Elastic Net models are stable, reliable, and ready for production use. Now that we've discussed validation techniques, let's explore how to fine-tune Elastic Net with hyperparameter optimization to get the best results. Getting the best performance from an Elastic Net model isn't just about using the right algorithm, it's about tuning it correctly. The two most critical hyperparameters in Elastic Net are lambda, regularization strength, and alpha, L1 versus L2 ratio. If these are chosen poorly, the model can end up overfitting, underfitting, or failing to generalize well. That's why hyperparameter optimization is essential. The lambda parameter controls how much regularization is applied. If lambda is too low, the model is barely regularized, meaning it might overfit by learning noise in the training data. If lambda is too high, the model becomes too constrained, losing valuable information and underfitting. Finding the right balance is key. Then there's alpha, which determines the mix of Lasso, L1, and Ridge, L2 penalties. An alpha value of 1 makes the model behave like Lasso, aggressively shrinking coefficients and setting some to 0. An alpha value of 0 makes it behave like Ridge, keeping all features but reducing their influence. The sweet spot is usually somewhere in between, depending on the data set. So how do we find the best combination of lambda and alpha? Instead of manually testing different values, we use automated hyperparameter tuning methods like grid search. This method systematically tests all possible combinations of lambda and alpha values, selecting the best pair based on performance metrics. While thorough, it can be computationally expensive, so how do we find the best combination of lambda and alpha? Instead of manually testing different values, we use automated hyperparameter tuning methods like grid search. This method systematically tests all possible combinations of lambda and alpha values, selecting the best pair based on performance metrics. While thorough, it can be computationally expensive. Randomized search. Instead of testing all combinations, this method selects random values within a specified range. It's faster than grid search while often finding similarly good results. Bayesian optimization. This advanced technique learns from past trials and intelligently selects new hyperparameters, reducing the number of iterations needed to find the optimal settings. Cross-validation-based tuning. By applying k-fold cross-validation during hyperparameter tuning, we ensure that the chosen values generalize well across different data splits. Tuning hyperparameters correctly can mean the difference between a mediocre model and a highly accurate one. Once we've found the best values for lambda and alpha, the next step is to ensure we're selecting the right model for the problem at hand. Up next, we dive into Elastic Net and model selection criteria, helping us decide when this technique is the best choice. Choosing the right model is a critical decision in machine learning. Elastic Net is powerful, but it's not a universal solution. It works exceptionally well in certain scenarios, but may be unnecessary or suboptimal in others. The key to selecting the best model lies in understanding the structure of the data, the complexity of relationships between variables, and the trade-offs between accuracy, interpretability, and computational cost. Elastic Net is particularly effective when dealing with high-dimensional datasets, where the number of predictors is greater than the number of observations. This makes it an excellent choice in fields like genomics, finance, and text analysis, where traditional regression models struggle to handle the complexity. It also excels in cases where predictors are highly correlated, as its ability to preserve groups of related features sets it apart from Lasso, which tends to arbitrarily drop one variable in favor of another. However, there are cases where Elastic Net might not be the best choice. If the dataset has nonlinear relationships, tree-based models like random forest or gradient boosting may provide better predictive power, as they can automatically capture complex interactions between features. Similarly, if the dataset is small and well-structured, a standard linear regression or ridge regression might be sufficient without the need for regularization. Interpretability is another key factor. Elastic Net provides clear feature importance rankings, making it a strong candidate for domains where understanding the influence of variables is essential, such as healthcare, credit risk assessment, and policy making. But in cases where interpretability is not required and predictive power is the primary goal, deep learning models may outperform Elastic Net, especially when working with image, audio, or unstructured text data. Ultimately, model selection is about balancing performance with explainability. If the goal is to achieve a stable, interpretable model that handles structured data with multicollinearity, Elastic Net remains one of the best choices available. Now that we know when to use Elastic Net, the next step is understanding how to fine-tune its regularization strength to optimize performance. Finding the right level of regularization is crucial to the success of an elastic net model. Too little regularization and the model overfits, capturing noise instead of meaningful patterns. Too much regularization and the model underfits, becoming too simplistic and missing important relationships. The regularization strength is controlled by the lambda parameter, which determines how much penalty is applied to the model's coefficients. Choosing the right lambda value ensures that the model generalizes well to new data without becoming overly complex or overly constrained. Lambda influences how Elastic Net balances bias and variance. When lambda is very small, the model behaves almost like ordinary least squares regression, with minimal penalty applied to the coefficients. This allows it to fit the training data well, but at the cost of high variance and poor performance on unseen data. When lambda is very large, the model shrinks all coefficients significantly, reducing variance but also potentially discarding useful predictors, leading to high bias. The ideal lambda value is found through cross-validation, where different values are tested to find the one that minimizes prediction error on unseen data. Elastic Net's strength lies in its ability to combine L1, Lasso, and L2, Ridge penalties, which means the effect of lambda also depends on the alpha parameter. If alpha is closer to 1, Elastic Net behaves more like Lasso, forcing some coefficients to 0 and performing feature selection aggressively. If alpha is closer to 0, it behaves more like Ridge, keeping all predictors but shrinking their influence. By fine-tuning both lambda and alpha, we can achieve a well-balanced model that retains the most important features while preventing overfitting. Regularization is particularly important in high-dimensional datasets where the number of predictors is large and some features may be redundant or irrelevant. Without proper regularization, a model trained on high-dimensional data is almost guaranteed to overfit. Elastic Net ensures that the model stays stable by filtering out noise while keeping correlated features together, which is especially useful in genomics, finance, and text analysis. Understanding regularization strength is key to building a model that is neither too simple nor too complex. The next step is ensuring that the model remains stable over different data splits and training iterations. That's where model stability comes into play, which we will explore next. A machine learning model isn't useful if its results change drastically every time it's retrained. Model stability refers to how consistent the model's predictions and selected features remain across different datasets and training iterations. A stable model provides reliable insights, ensuring that the same variables remain important even when new data is introduced. Elastic Net plays a crucial role in improving stability by combining the strengths of Lasso and Ridge, preventing excessive fluctuations in model coefficients. One of the biggest challenges in machine learning is high variance in feature selection. Lasso, for example, aggressively shrinks some coefficients to 0, meaning that small changes in data can cause entirely different variables to be selected. This makes it difficult to interpret which predictors are truly important. Ridge, on the other hand, keeps all features but shrinks their influence, making it more stable but less effective at removing noise. Elastic Net blends these two approaches, ensuring that important correlated features are selected together rather than arbitrarily choosing one over the other. Another factor affecting model stability is sampling variability. If a model is trained on slightly different data each time, we expect some variation in results, but a well-regularized Elastic Net model ensures that the core predictive features remain consistent. This is particularly important in healthcare, finance, and scientific research, where model stability directly impacts decision-making. Cross-validation is a key technique for assessing model stability. By training and testing Elastic Net on multiple subsets of data, we can check whether the selected features and coefficients remain stable across different splits. If a model's feature importance rankings change dramatically between training runs, it may indicate that regularization is too weak or that the dataset contains too much noise. A stable model is also easier to interpret and trust If business leaders, doctors, or financial analysts rely on machine learning models to make decisions, they need confidence that the model won't produce wildly different predictions every time it's retrained. Elastic Net helps maintain stability by balancing feature selection with coefficient shrinkage, ensuring that the model remains both interpretable and robust. Now that we understand how Elastic Net improves model stability, the next step is analyzing how it impacts predictive performance, because at the end of the day, a model's effectiveness is measured by how well it makes accurate predictions. A model is only as good as its predictions. No matter how well it selects features or avoids overfitting, its true value lies in how accurately it can predict new data. Elastic Net is widely used in machine learning because it balances predictive performance with model simplicity, ensuring that the model generalizes well rather than just memorizing the training data. Predictive performance depends on several factors, including data quality, feature engineering, and hyperparameter tuning. A poorly prepared dataset with irrelevant or noisy variables can lead to lower accuracy regardless of the algorithm used. One of the key advantages of Elastic Net is that it helps improve predictive performance by automatically selecting the most relevant features while removing those that contribute little or add unnecessary complexity. One of the most common ways to measure predictive performance is through mean squared error, MSE, or root mean squared error, RMSE. These metrics indicate how far off the model's predictions are from actual values. A well-tuned Elastic Net model typically achieves a lower MSE compared to unregularized regression models because it avoids overfitting, leading to better generalization to new data. Another key performance metric is R squared, R2, which measures how much variance in the target variable is explained by the model. While a high R2 indicates good predictive power, it should always be cross-checked with other error metrics to ensure the model isn't just overfitting the training data. If R2 is too high and MSE is also high on test data, the model might be fitting noise instead of real patterns. Hyperparameter tuning plays a crucial role in improving predictive performance. By optimizing lambda and alpha using cross-validation, we ensure that the model is neither too simple nor too complex, maximizing its predictive accuracy while maintaining stability. Regularization strength directly impacts how well Elastic Net balances bias and variance, leading to a model that works well across different datasets and real-world applications. A model with strong predictive performance provides real business value, whether it's predicting stock prices, customer churn, or disease risk. Elastic Net allows data scientists to build robust, interpretable models that deliver accurate forecasts. But a model's performance isn't just about accuracy, it also needs to be robust and reliable across different datasets and conditions. That's exactly what we'll explore next as we dive into model robustness and why it matters. A model isn't just judged by how well it performs on a single dataset. It also needs to be robust, meaning it should maintain its accuracy and reliability across different data distributions, noisy environments, and unexpected changes. Robustness is what separates a truly effective model from one that only works under ideal conditions. Elastic Net contributes to model robustness by improving stability, feature selection, and generalization. One of the key factors affecting robustness is how well a model handles new or unseen data. If a model is too finely tuned to a specific dataset, it may fail when exposed to real-world variations. This is often a problem in finance, healthcare, and marketing, where the data changes over time due to market trends, evolving diseases, or shifting customer behaviors. Elastic Net helps improve robustness by applying regularization, which prevents the model from overfitting to training data, ensuring it generalizes better when new inputs are introduced. Another major challenge in building robust models is handling noisy data. Real-world datasets are rarely perfect. They contain errors, missing values, and irrelevant features. A traditional linear regression model is highly sensitive to noise, leading to unreliable predictions. Elastic Net, however, helps counteract noise by shrinking less important features towards zero, effectively filtering out weak or misleading predictors, leading to a more stable and reliable model. Elastic Net also improves robustness by preserving correlated features instead of arbitrarily dropping them, unlike Lasso. In applications like genomics and economics, where multiple variables often provide similar information, maintaining grouped feature selection helps prevent the loss of useful insights. This ensures that the model remains resilient even when certain data points are removed or modified. Finally, robustness isn't just about accuracy, it's also about consistency over multiple training iterations. A robust elastic net model should yield similar results when trained on slightly different datasets, ensuring that decisions made based on its predictions remain reliable. By fine-tuning lambda and alpha and using cross-validation techniques, we can enhance model robustness, ensuring that it performs consistently across different conditions. A robust model is one that can be trusted even when data isn't perfect. But to achieve this, the data itself must be well prepared. Up next, we explore how Elastic Net interacts with data preprocessing and why cleaning and transforming data is critical to model success. No machine learning model can perform well without properly prepared data. Data preprocessing is the foundation of any predictive model, and Elastic Net is no exception. Poorly processed data, filled with missing values, outliers, or inconsistent scales, can lead to unreliable results. To get the best performance out of Elastic Net, we need to clean, standardize, and transform the data before feeding it into the model. One of the first steps in preprocessing is handling missing data. In real-world datasets, missing values are common, especially in fields like healthcare and finance. Simply ignoring them can introduce bias, while filling them incorrectly can distort patterns. Common techniques include mean imputation, median imputation, or predictive modeling-based imputation to estimate missing values. Elastic Net is somewhat resistant to missing data because it shrinks irrelevant coefficients, but a well-prepared dataset still leads to better stability. Next, we need to address outliers. Extreme values in the dataset can distort regression models, causing coefficients to become unstable. Techniques like Winsorization, clipping extreme values, log transformations, or robust scaling help limit the impact of outliers while preserving valuable information. Since Elastic Net applies L2 regularization, it reduces sensitivity to outliers compared to standard Lasso, but it's still essential to check for extreme values before training the model. Another key preprocessing step is feature scaling. Elastic Net relies on regularization, meaning that the scale of the input variables directly affects the model. If one feature has much larger values than another, e.g., income in dollars versus credit score on a DO 1000 scale, the model will prioritize the larger numbers unless the data is standardized. Scaling techniques like z-score normalization, subtracting the mean and dividing by the standard deviation, or min-max scaling ensure that all features are treated equally. Feature engineering also plays a crucial role. Creating interaction terms, polynomial features, or transforming categorical variables into numerical representations improves Elastic Net's ability to extract patterns from data. One hot encoding is commonly used for categorical variables, but in high-dimensional datasets, this can create thousands of new features. Since Elastic Net automatically selects only the most relevant features, it can handle high-dimensional encoding more effectively than standard linear regression. Proper data preprocessing isn't just about improving model accuracy, it's about ensuring that Elastic Net can learn effectively from structured, well-prepared data. Next, we take a deeper look at feature scaling and how it impacts Elastic Net's ability to find meaningful patterns. Feature scaling is one of the most important preprocessing steps for Elastic Net regression. Since Elastic Net applies L1 and L2 penalties to the model's coefficients, the scale of the input features directly affects how much regularization is applied. Without proper scaling, some features could dominate others simply because they have larger numerical values, leading to misleading results and poor model performance. The issue arises when features have vastly different units or magnitudes. For example, imagine a dataset where one feature represents income in dollars, e.g., 50,000 to 500,000, while another feature represents age, ranging from 18 to 80. Since the regularization terms in Elastic Net apply penalties based on coefficient size, the model might unfairly shrink the coefficients of smaller valued features, even if they are important. Proper feature scaling ensures that all variables contribute equally to the learning process. There are two common techniques for scaling features in Elastic Net: standardization and normalization. Standardization, z-score scaling, transforms each feature so that it has a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1. This is done by subtracting the mean and dividing by the standard deviation of each feature. Standardization is particularly useful when data follows a normal distribution or contains outliers, as it ensures that extreme values do not disproportionately influence the model. Normalization, min-max scaling, rescales each feature to a range between 0 and 1. This method is useful when data has a known range and should be interpreted in relative terms. However, it can be sensitive to outliers, since extreme values can significantly distort the scaling process. In practice, standardization is the preferred method for Elastic Net because it works well with both L1 and L2 penalties. Since the penalty terms depend on the magnitude of the coefficients, ensuring that all features are on the same scale prevents the model from over-penalizing or under-penalizing certain variables. Elastic Net's performance heavily depends on how well the input data is prepared, and feature scaling is a crucial step in this process. Without scaling, the model may assign undue importance to certain variables simply because they have larger numerical values, leading to biased feature selection and unstable predictions. Now that we understand the importance of scaling, the next step is data transformation, where we explore how converting variables, such as applying logarithmic, polynomial, or categorical transformations, can further enhance Elastic Net's ability to capture meaningful relationships. Raw data is rarely in its ideal form for machine learning. Sometimes a direct relationship between variables and the target variable doesn't exist, making it difficult for a model to extract meaningful patterns. Data transformation techniques help reshape data into a format that improves the performance of Elastic Net, making it easier to identify key predictors while keeping the model stable and interpretable. One of the most common transformations is logarithmic scaling. Many real-world datasets contain features that are heavily skewed, meaning that some values are much larger than others. This is common in financial data, where incomes, transaction amounts, or stock prices can range from small to extremely large values. Applying a log transformation helps compress these differences, reducing the impact of outliers and allowing Elastic Net to handle the data more effectively. Another useful transformation is polynomial feature expansion. Some relationships between variables and the target outcome are nonlinear, meaning a simple linear model like Elastic Net may not capture them effectively. By creating squared or interaction terms, we allow the model to learn more complex patterns without introducing entirely new algorithms. However, since polynomial features increase the number of predictors, Elastic Net's built-in regularization helps prevent overfitting by selecting only the most important ones. Handling categorical variables is also a crucial part of data transformation. Machine learning models, including Elastic Net, require numerical inputs, meaning categorical features like customer type, job title, or product category must be converted into numbers. One approach is one-hot encoding, which creates separate binary columns for each category. However, for datasets with many categories, this can lead to a high-dimensional feature space. Elastic Net helps mitigate this problem by selecting only the most relevant categorical features while shrinking or removing the rest. Binning numerical variables into discrete categories is another technique that can improve model interpretability. For example, instead of using raw income values, we can create income brackets such as low, medium, and high. This helps smooth out noisy fluctuations and allows Elastic Net to focus on broader trends rather than individual numerical differences. Data transformation is a powerful pre-processing step that helps align features with the strengths of Elastic Net. By scaling, encoding, and engineering meaningful representations of the data, we ensure that the model performs at its best. Now that we've prepared our data, the next step is understanding how to interpret Elastic Net results, ensuring that model outputs are both meaningful and actionable. A model is only valuable if we can understand and trust its outputs. One of the biggest advantages of Elastic Net over black box models like neural networks is that it remains interpretable, allowing us to see which features are driving predictions, but just looking at the coefficients isn't always enough. We need the right interpretation techniques to extract insights that can guide real-world decisions. One of the most direct ways to interpret an Elastic Net model is by analyzing feature coefficients. Since Elastic Net applies both L1 and L2 penalties, some coefficients are shrunk towards zero, while others remain significant. A positive coefficient means that an increase in that variable leads to a higher predicted value, while a negative coefficient means the opposite. If a coefficient is exactly zero, Elastic Net has determined that the feature is not useful and has effectively removed it from the model. However, raw coefficients don't always tell the full story. Standardized coefficients provide a clearer picture by showing how much each feature contributes in terms of standard deviations. This makes it easier to compare the relative importance of different predictors, especially when features are measured on different scales. A powerful visualization technique for Elastic Net interpretation is regularization paths. These plots show how each feature's coefficient evolves as we change the regularization strength, lambda. If a feature disappears early, it likely has little predictive power, while features that remain stable across different lambda values are strong indicators. Regularization paths help us see which variables are truly important and which ones are just adding noise. To make Elastic Net models even more interpretable, we can use Shapley additive explanations values, which break down the contribution of each feature to a specific prediction. Unlike standard coefficient analysis, SHAP values allow us to explain individual predictions, showing why the model made a certain decision for a given data point. This is especially useful in high-stakes applications like finance and healthcare, where understanding why a prediction was made is just as important as the prediction itself. Interpretability is essential in industries where machine learning models must be explainable and transparent. Elastic Net strikes a balance between complexity and interpretability, making it an excellent choice for scenarios where stakeholders need to trust and understand the model's decisions. Now that we've covered interpretation techniques, the next step is evaluating model performance using the right metrics, ensuring that our model isn't just explainable but also accurate. Building an Elastic Net model is just the first step. To determine whether the model is actually performing well, we need to evaluate it using the right metrics. A good evaluation process ensures that the model is accurate, reliable, and generalizes well to new data. But choosing the right metric depends on the type of problem we're solving, whether it's regression or classification. For regression problems, where Elastic Net is most commonly used, the key metrics include mean squared error, MSE, root mean squared error, RMSE, and mean absolute error, MAE. MSE calculates the average squared differences between predicted and actual values, with larger errors receiving more weight. RMSE is simply the square root of MSE, making it easier to interpret since it's in the same unit as the target variable. MAE, on the other hand, gives equal weight to all errors, making it more robust against outliers compared to MSE. Another critical regression metric is R-squared, R2, which measures how much of the variance in the target variable is explained by the model. An R2 value close to 1 means the model fits the data well, while a low R2 suggests that important patterns are being missed. However, R2 alone can be misleading. It tends to increase as more features are added, even if those features don't improve predictions. This is why adjusted R2 is often preferred, as it accounts for the number of predictors in the model and penalizes unnecessary complexity. If we're working on a classification problem where Elastic Net is applied in logistic regression, key evaluation metrics shift to accuracy, precision, recall, and F1 score. Accuracy measures the proportion of correct predictions, but it can be misleading if the dataset is imbalanced. Precision tells us how many of the predicted positives were actually correct, while recall measures how many actual positives were successfully identified. The F1 score balances precision and recall, making it especially useful when false positives and false negatives have significant consequences. Cross-validation plays a crucial role in evaluation. Instead of relying on a single test split, K-fold cross-validation ensures that the model's performance is measured across multiple subsets of data, providing a more reliable estimate of accuracy and preventing overfitting. This step is essential when fine-tuning lambda and alpha, ensuring that the chosen values optimize predictive power while keeping the model stable. Choosing the right evaluation metric ensures that our Elastic Net model isn't just a good fit for the training data, but also a reliable predictor for new, unseen data. Now that we understand how to measure performance, the next step is comparing Elastic Net with other modeling approaches, helping us decide when it's the best choice and when alternative models might be better suited for the task. Elastic Net is a powerful tool, but how does it stack up against other machine learning models? The choice of model depends on the data, the complexity of relationships between variables, and the trade-offs between accuracy, interpretability, and computational efficiency. While Elastic Net combines the strengths of Lasso and ridge regression, other models may be better suited for specific tasks. One of the closest alternatives is ridge regression. Ridge is great for handling multicollinearity because it shrinks coefficients without setting any to 0. This means ridge keeps all features in the model, making it useful when all predictors contain valuable information. However, unlike Elastic Net, ridge doesn't perform feature selection, which can be a disadvantage when working with high-dimensional datasets where some variables are irrelevant. On the other side, we have Lasso regression, which aggressively forces some coefficients to 0, effectively removing less important features. While this makes Lasso useful for feature selection, it struggles when predictors are highly correlated. It tends to pick one and discard the rest arbitrarily. Elastic Net solves this problem by allowing correlated features to stay in the model while still enforcing sparsity. If we move beyond linear models, we have tree-based algorithms like decision trees, random forests, and gradient boosting. These models are highly flexible, capturing complex non-linear relationships that Elastic Net might miss. However, they tend to sacrifice interpretability, making it harder to explain why a particular prediction was made. Tree-based models are often preferred when relationships between features are complex, but for problems where interpretability matters, like finance, healthcare, or policymaking, Elastic Net remains a strong choice. For even more complex datasets, deep learning models like neural networks can outperform Elastic Net, especially in image recognition, natural language processing, and other unstructured data applications. However, deep learning models require large datasets and significant computational power, making them less practical for smaller structured datasets, where Elastic Net performs well with fewer resources. Welcome to the new era of video creation with Jog AI. Simply type your script to get started. No machine learning model works perfectly right out of the box. To get the best performance from Elastic Net, model tuning is essential. Fine-tuning the regularization parameters, lambda and alpha, ensures the model generalizes well to new data without overfitting or underfitting. The right balance between feature selection and coefficient shrinkage is key to building a stable and accurate Elastic Net model. The most critical parameter to tune is lambda, the regularization strength. A low lambda value results in minimal regularization, meaning the model behaves almost like ordinary least squares regression, keeping all features and potentially overfitting. A high lambda value, on the other hand, shrinks coefficients aggressively, removing many features and increasing bias. The goal is to find the optimal lambda that minimizes error on unseen data. The second key parameter is alpha, which controls the balance between L1, Lasso, and L2, Ridge, penalties. When alpha F1, the model behaves like Lasso, performing strong feature selection but struggling with correlated predictors. When alpha chop is 0, it behaves like Ridge, keeping all features but reducing coefficient size. A middle value, e.g., alpha factor 0.5, blends both approaches, making Elastic Net effective in handling multicollinearity while still selecting the most important features. To find the best combination of lambda and alpha, we use automated hyperparameter tuning techniques like grid search, random search, and Bayesian optimization. Grid search systematically tests different combinations of lambda and alpha, while random search picks random values within a range, often finding a good solution more efficiently. Bayesian optimization uses past evaluations to make smarter guesses, reducing the number of iterations needed to reach the optimal parameters. Cross-validation is critical during model tuning. Instead of evaluating performance on just one trained test split, k-fold cross-validation ensures that different subsets of the data are tested, providing a more reliable estimate of the best hyperparameters. This prevents overfitting to a single dataset and improves generalization. A well-tuned Elastic Net model balances predictive accuracy, stability, and interpretability. With proper tuning, it can outperform traditional regression models while maintaining transparency in how predictions are made. Now that we've optimized Elastic Net's hyperparameters, the next step is ensuring the model generalizes well to new data, which is what we'll explore next. A model is only valuable if it works well on new, unseen data. Generalization refers to a model's ability to make accurate predictions on real-world data, not just the training set. If a model performs well during training but fails when tested on new samples, it's overfitting. If it's too simplistic and ignores meaningful patterns, it's underfitting. Elastic Net helps improve generalization by preventing both extremes, ensuring the model learns real trends without memorizing noise. One of the biggest threats to generalization is overfitting, where the model captures irrelevant fluctuations in the training data instead of true relationships. Elastic Net mitigates this by applying L1 and L2 regularization, shrinking coefficients, and removing unnecessary features. This keeps the model focused on the most important predictors, preventing it from adapting too much to random noise. Underfitting happens when the model is too constrained, meaning it doesn't capture the necessary complexity of the data. This can occur if lambda is set too high, shrinking coefficients too aggressively, and discarding useful predictors. To ensure the right balance, cross-validation is used to find the optimal lambda that minimizes prediction error on unseen data. Feature selection plays a crucial role in generalization. A model with too many irrelevant variables can easily overfit, while a model with too few features might miss important signals. Elastic Net allows correlated features to stay in the model rather than forcing an arbitrary selection, which improves robustness and ensures that key relationships aren't lost. Another critical factor is data drift, the idea that real-world data changes over time. A model trained on historical data might perform well initially, but degrade as patterns shift. Regular retraining on fresh data ensures the model continues to generalize well. Monitoring performance metrics like MSE, RMSE, and R2 over time helps detect when retraining is needed. Generalization is the ultimate test of a model's reliability. Elastic Net provides built-in safeguards against overfitting while maintaining flexibility to capture meaningful patterns. But model complexity also affects generalization, and the next step is understanding how to reduce unnecessary complexity while keeping predictive power intact. A good machine learning model should be as simple as possible while still making accurate predictions. Complex models with too many features might seem powerful, but they often lead to overfitting, increased computation time, and reduced interpretability. Elastic Net helps tackle this problem by reducing model complexity without sacrificing predictive performance. One of the main ways Elastic Net simplifies models is through automatic feature selection. Unlike ridge regression, which keeps all features and just shrinks their coefficients, Elastic Net removes irrelevant or redundant predictors by setting their coefficients to 0. This leads to a sparser, more efficient model that focuses only on the most informative variables. Another advantage is that Elastic Net groups correlated features together, instead of arbitrarily selecting just one like Lasso does. This means that if two or more features contain similar information, they will either be kept together or jointly reduced, ensuring that no critical information is lost. This makes the model more robust and interpretable, especially in high-dimensional datasets like genomics, finance, and marketing analytics. Reducing complexity also improves computational efficiency. Large models require more memory and processing power, making them harder to deploy in real-time applications. By removing unnecessary features, Elastic Net speeds up both training and inference, making it ideal for use cases where fast decision-making is required, such as fraud detection or medical diagnostics. Regularization strength plays a key role in complexity reduction. If lambda is too low, the model retains too many features, making it unnecessarily complex. If lambda is too high, it may discard too much information, leading to underfitting. Tuning lambda and alpha properly through cross-validation ensures that the model is as simple as possible without losing predictive power. Simplifying a model isn't just about making it smaller, it's about making it more efficient, interpretable, and reliable. By automatically selecting the most relevant features and eliminating noise, Elastic Net helps create models that are both powerful and manageable. But model complexity isn't the only factor to consider. Scalability is also essential, especially when working with large datasets. That's what we'll explore next. As datasets grow larger, models need to scale efficiently. A model that works well on small data might become too slow, too memory-intensive, or too unstable when applied to big data. Elastic Net is well suited for scalability because it offers built-in feature selection, efficient computation, and adaptability to large-scale machine learning frameworks. One of the main scalability advantages of Elastic Net is that it automatically reduces the number of features. In high-dimensional datasets, many variables are redundant or irrelevant. Instead of processing thousands of unnecessary predictors, Elastic Net removes them by setting their coefficients to 0, allowing for faster training and inference times. This is particularly useful in fields like genomics, finance, and e-commerce, where datasets can contain millions of features. Another factor that improves scalability is sparse matrix representation. Since Elastic Net tends to produce sparse models, many coefficients set to 0, it can be optimized using efficient matrix operations, significantly reducing memory usage. Libraries like scikit-learn, TensorFlow, and Spark MLlib take advantage of these optimizations, making it possible to train Elastic Net models on distributed computing clusters. Parallel computing further enhances Elastic Net's scalability. Modern implementations use multi-threading and GPU acceleration to process large datasets faster. This is particularly important in applications like real-time fraud detection, personalized recommendation systems, and high-frequency trading, where decisions need to be made instantly on massive datasets. Scalability isn't just about handling more data, it's also about maintaining model accuracy and stability as data volume increases. Some models degrade when faced with millions of rows or thousands of features, but Elastic Net remains robust due to its regularization techniques, which prevent overfitting even as data complexity grows. A scalable model is one that performs well whether it's processing thousands or millions of records. Elastic Net's ability to adapt to large-scale data environments while maintaining efficiency and interpretability makes it a preferred choice for big data applications. But a model isn't just something you train once. It needs ongoing maintenance to remain relevant over time. Next, we explore how to maintain and update an Elastic Net model for long-term effectiveness. Machine learning models aren't static. They need continuous monitoring and updating to stay effective. Data patterns shift, new trends emerge, and models that once performed well may start to degrade. Elastic Net, like any other model, requires ongoing maintenance to ensure it remains accurate, stable, and aligned with real-world data. One of the biggest challenges in model maintenance is concept drift. Over time, the relationships between variables may change. For example, a customer churn prediction model trained last year might no longer be relevant because of new pricing strategies, market shifts, or changes in customer behavior. Regular performance monitoring helps detect when a model starts to degrade so it can be retrained with fresh data. Regular retraining schedules are essential. The frequency of retraining depends on the application. Some models need updates daily, e.g., fraud detection, while others may only need quarterly or annual adjustments, e.g., credit risk assessment. Automating retraining pipelines ensures that the Elastic Net model is always working with the latest available data, reducing the risk of outdated predictions. Another key maintenance step is hyperparameter tuning over time. Just because a model was optimized once doesn't mean those settings will remain optimal forever. As new data arrives, the best values for lambda and alpha may shift. Running periodic grid search or Bayesian optimization on updated datasets ensures that the model is always using the most effective regularization settings. Feature importance should also be reviewed periodically. If Elastic Net is consistently dropping certain predictors while keeping others, it may indicate that some features are no longer relevant. By regularly auditing which features are contributing to predictions, we can refine the dataset, remove outdated variables, and introduce new, more meaningful features. Finally, version control and documentation are crucial for maintainability. Keeping track of past model versions, training data snapshots, and hyperparameter configurations ensures that previous results can be reproduced and analyzed. Tools like MLflow, DBC, or even simple logging systems help maintain transparency in the modeling process. A well-maintained model is a reliable model. By setting up automated monitoring, regular retraining, and feature audits, Elastic Net can continue to deliver high-quality predictions long after it was first deployed. But maintenance isn't just about performance. It's also about documentation and reproducibility, which is what we'll cover next. A great model is useless if no one understands how it was built, why certain decisions were made, or how to reproduce its results. Model documentation is a crucial but often overlooked step in machine learning. Without clear records, maintaining, improving, or even debugging an elastic net model becomes a challenge, especially when multiple teams are involved. One of the most important aspects of documentation is recording model architecture and hyperparameters. Every elastic net model relies on specific values for lambda and alpha, which determine the level of regularization and feature selection. Keeping track of these values, along with details about the dataset and preprocessing steps, ensures that the model can be retrained or fine-tuned later without starting from scratch. Another critical piece of documentation is feature selection insights. Elastic Net automatically removes some predictors by shrinking their coefficients to 0, meaning that only the most relevant variables remain in the final model. Documenting which features were retained, which were removed, and why helps explain how the model makes predictions. This is especially important in regulated industries like finance and healthcare, where transparency is required. Version control is essential for reproducibility. Using tools like Git, DVC, data version control, or MLflow, data scientists can track different iterations of the model, compare past versions, and roll back to previous states if needed. Keeping snapshots of training datasets, model parameters, and performance metrics ensures that past results can be validated at any time. Model documentation should also include performance benchmarks. Storing metrics like MSE, RMSE, R2, and cross-validation scores provides a historical record of the model's accuracy and stability over time. If performance starts degrading, teams can refer back to past results to understand what has changed and take corrective action. Finally, documentation should be written in a format that's accessible to both technical and non-technical stakeholders. A well-documented Elastic Net model should not only provide code and hyperparameter logs, but also include business-friendly explanations about how the model is used, what insights it provides, and what its limitations are. Good documentation ensures that machine learning models are reproducible, transparent, and easy to maintain. But transparency isn't just about keeping records. It's also about ensuring that models are fair, explainable, and free from bias, which is what we'll explore next. A machine learning model is only valuable if its results can be reproduced consistently. Reproducibility means that if another team, or even the same team months later, retrains the Elastic Net model using the same data and parameters, they should get the same results. Without reproducibility, machine learning becomes unreliable, leading to wasted time, inconsistent decisions, and a lack of trust in the model. One of the biggest challenges in reproducibility is data versioning. If the dataset changes, even slightly, the model's predictions may also change. Using tools like DVC, data version control, MLflow, or even structured file storage with timestamps helps track dataset versions, ensuring that models are always trained on the correct data. Keeping an immutable copy of the training set prevents future inconsistencies. Another key factor is recording hyperparameters and preprocessing steps. Elastic Net requires tuning of lambda and alpha, which directly impact feature selection and model performance. If these values are not properly logged, reproducing past results becomes impossible. Documenting all preprocessing steps, such as feature scaling, encoding methods, and outlier handling, is equally important, as even minor differences can lead to drastically different outputs. To further improve reproducibility, machine learning teams should use fixed random seeds during training. Many algorithms, including Elastic Net, rely on random initialization at certain stages, such as splitting datasets for cross-validation. Setting a fixed seed ensures that training produces the same results every time, making debugging and comparison easier. Reproducibility also extends to model deployment. If a model is retrained for production use, it should perform identically to the version that was tested and validated. Using containerization tools like Docker and model management frameworks like MLflow ensures that the same software environment, including dependencies and libraries, is used in both development and production. Reproducibility is about more than just convenience, it's about trust. If results can't be reliably replicated, stakeholders lose confidence in machine learning as a decision-making tool. Elastic Net, when properly documented and versioned, provides a transparent and reliable modeling process. But reproducibility is just one piece of transparency. Next, we'll explore how model transparency helps explain predictions and build trust in machine learning models. A machine learning model is only as good as our ability to understand and trust its predictions. Model transparency ensures that stakeholders, whether they are business leaders, regulators, or customers, can see how decisions are made. Elastic Net, unlike black box models such as deep learning, offers a high level of transparency by providing interpretable coefficients and clear feature selection. One of the biggest advantages of Elastic Net is that it allows us to directly examine feature importance. Since the model applies L1, Lasso, and L2, ridge penalties, some coefficients are reduced to 0 while others remain significant. This means we can clearly identify which variables influence the predictions and by how much. In contrast, complex models like neural networks require explainability tools to approximate feature importance, making them harder to interpret. Another key aspect of transparency is consistency in decision-making. If a model gives different predictions for similar inputs, it becomes difficult to justify its reliability. Elastic Net improves consistency by ensuring that correlated features are grouped together rather than making arbitrary choices about which to keep or discard. This leads to more stable and interpretable models, especially in industries like healthcare and finance, where model decisions have serious consequences. Transparency also plays a role in bias detection. Because Elastic Net highlights which features are driving predictions, we can inspect whether the model is relying on biased or unfair predictors. For example, if a loan approval model is placing too much weight on zip codes or demographic factors, this can be flagged and corrected. In black box models, detecting such biases is far more difficult. In regulated industries, transparency is not just a best practice, it's a requirement. Many organizations must comply with explainability standards such as GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, and the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which require that AI-driven decisions be understandable to users. Since Elastic Net provides clear explanations for why certain features are included and others are removed, it aligns well with regulatory needs. Ultimately, transparency builds trust in machine learning. If a model's decisions can be explained, understood, and justified, it is far more likely to be adopted by organizations and stakeholders. But transparency alone isn't enough. We also need to ensure that machine learning models are ethically designed to prevent unfair bias and unintended harm. That's what we'll explore next. Machine learning models, including Elastic Net, are not just mathematical equations. They make decisions that can impact people's lives. Ethical considerations in AI and machine learning ensure that models are fair, unbiased, and used responsibly. Even though Elastic Net is more interpretable than black box models, ethical risks still exist, and it's crucial to address them proactively. One of the biggest ethical concerns is bias in feature selection. While Elastic Net automatically removes less important features, it may still retain variables that introduce unintended discrimination. For example, in hiring or loan approval models, features like income, education level, or home address could indirectly correlate with race or gender, leading to biased outcomes. Regular audits of feature importance help ensure that models are not reinforcing systemic biases. Another ethical challenge is data quality and fairness. If the dataset used to train an elastic net model contains historical biases, the model will learn and reinforce those patterns. In criminal justice, for example, if past data shows racial disparities in arrest records, a predictive policing model might unfairly target certain groups, even if race itself is not an input variable. Addressing these risks requires careful dataset curation, bias detection tools, and fairness-aware model adjustments. Transparency plays a key role in ethical AI. Since Elastic Net provides interpretable coefficients, organizations must ensure that stakeholders understand how the model makes decisions. If an individual is denied a loan, they should be able to receive a clear explanation of which factors contributed to that decision. Without transparency, machine learning can appear arbitrary and unaccountable. Ethical AI also involves responsible model deployment. Even if an Elastic Net model performs well today, real-world conditions change. Continuous monitoring ensures that ethical risks are reassessed over time. If the model starts producing unexpected disparities in predictions, retraining with more representative data, or adjusting regularization parameters may be necessary to maintain fairness. Regulatory compliance is becoming increasingly important in AI ethics. Laws like GDPR in Europe and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, ECOA, in the US, require models to be explainable and free from discrimination. Organizations using Elastic Net must ensure that their models meet legal and ethical guidelines to avoid reputational and financial consequences. Ethical machine learning isn't just about avoiding harm. It's about building fair, responsible, and trustworthy AI systems. As machine learning adoption grows, organizations that prioritize ethics will gain a competitive advantage by fostering trust and accountability. But ethical concerns don't stop at fairness. Compliance with industry regulations is just as crucial, and that's what we'll explore next. As machine learning becomes increasingly integrated into industries like finance, healthcare, and law enforcement, regulatory compliance is no longer optional. It's a necessity. Elastic Net, with its built-in feature selection and transparency, aligns well with many compliance requirements, but organizations still need to ensure that their models adhere to legal standards and ethical guidelines. One of the most critical regulations affecting machine learning is the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, in Europe. Under GDPR, organizations must provide explainable AI, meaning that if a model's decision impacts a person, such as loan approval or hiring decisions, the individual has the right to understand how the decision was made. Since Elastic Net offers interpretable coefficients and feature importance rankings, it is a strong choice for applications requiring regulatory transparency. In the financial sector, compliance with laws like the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, ECOA, and the Fair Credit Reporting Act, FCRA, is essential. These regulations prevent discrimination in lending and require that credit decisions be fair and explainable. Because Elastic Net reveals which features impact predictions, it allows financial institutions to justify loan approvals or rejections in a way that aligns with compliance requirements. Healthcare is another heavily regulated field where Elastic Net can play a key role. Regulations like HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, in the US demand that medical predictions, such as disease risk assessments, be transparent and interpretable. Unlike deep learning models, which can be difficult to explain, Elastic Net allows doctors and regulators to clearly understand how patient data is being used in predictive models. Another major area of compliance is bias detection and fairness auditing. Regulators are increasingly requiring that machine learning models be tested for unintended discrimination. In the US, the Algorithmic Accountability Act aims to increase transparency in AI decision-making, while frameworks like EU AI Act are being developed to set strict rules on AI fairness and risk assessment. Regular audits of Elastic Net models, such as checking whether certain demographic groups receive disproportionately different predictions, help ensure compliance with these evolving standards. To meet compliance requirements, organizations should also maintain detailed model documentation, keeping records of training data sources, hyperparameters, lambda and alpha, and model validation results allows businesses to demonstrate that their models were built using fair and transparent processes. This protects companies from regulatory fines and legal challenges. Staying compliant in an evolving regulatory landscape is a challenge, but organizations that prioritize explainability, fairness, and transparency will be better positioned for long-term success. Beyond compliance, it's also important to align with industry best practices, ensuring that machine learning models meet professional and technical standards, something we'll explore next. As machine learning adoption grows across industries, organizations must ensure that their models align with established best practices and technical standards. Industry standards provide guidelines for accuracy, transparency, fairness, and reliability, helping organizations build trustworthy and high-performing models. Elastic Net is widely used in industries like finance, healthcare, and engineering because it meets many of these key standards. In finance, models used for credit risk assessment, stock market forecasting, and fraud detection must comply with strict guidelines. Organizations follow standards such as Basel III for banking regulations and IFRS 9 for financial reporting, both of which emphasize model explainability and risk assessment. Because Elastic Net is transparent and provides interpretable coefficients, it helps financial institutions meet these regulatory and industry requirements. In healthcare and pharmaceuticals, standards like ISO 13485 ensure that machine learning models used for medical diagnostics and drug discovery are developed under strict quality control. Elastic Net is particularly useful in genomics and disease prediction, where models must be interpretable and stable. Since HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, compliance requires medical AI models to be explainable, Elastic Net aligns well with these standards. For marketing and customer analytics, Elastic Net supports GDPR-compliant data processing by allowing organizations to justify predictions in areas like personalized recommendations, churn prediction, and pricing optimization. Industry guidelines such as those from the Interactive Advertising Bureau, IAB, and ISO 27701 for privacy management require companies to be transparent about how customer data is used, something Elastic Net naturally enables. Machine learning engineers and data scientists also follow technical best practices when implementing models. Standards from organizations like IEEE, Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, and NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, provide frameworks for building fair, accountable, and transparent AI models. Best practices include documenting feature selection processes, ensuring reproducibility, and validating models through cross-validation, all of which Elastic Net supports. By adhering to industry standards, organizations ensure that their models are not only accurate, but also ethical, transparent, and legally compliant. As machine learning regulations evolve, businesses that prioritize explainability and compliance with industry guidelines will gain a competitive advantage. Looking ahead, we now explore future trends in Elastic Net and machine learning, seeing how these models will evolve in the coming years. Machine learning is constantly evolving, and Elastic Net is no exception. As data continues to grow in size and complexity, new techniques and technologies are shaping the future of regularized regression models. While Elastic Net remains a powerful and widely used method, emerging trends in AI and machine learning will impact how it is applied in finance, healthcare, e-commerce, and beyond. One major trend is automated hyperparameter tuning. Traditionally, optimizing lambda and alpha required grid search or cross-validation, which can be computationally expensive. New advancements in Bayesian optimization and AutoML, automated machine learning, allow models to automatically select the best hyperparameters with minimal human intervention, making Elastic Net even more efficient. Another growing area is integration with deep learning and hybrid models. While ElasticNet is mainly used in structured data, researchers are now combining it with neural networks and feature embeddings to improve interpretability in complex models. For example, ElasticNet is being used in neural architecture search, NAS, to automatically select relevant features in deep learning pipelines, balancing performance and transparency. In high-dimensional data analysis, Elastic Net is playing an increasing role in genomics, bioinformatics, and personalized medicine. With the rise of precision healthcare, where patient data is highly complex and feature-rich, Elastic Net remains a preferred choice for identifying key biomarkers and genetic risk factors while ensuring model stability. Advances in cloud computing and distributed computing frameworks like Apache Spark are also making it easier to apply ElasticNet to large-scale medical datasets. Regulatory and ethical considerations are also shaping the future of ElasticNet applications. With the rise of explainable AI, XAI, and increasing pressure for transparent machine learning models, ElasticNet is gaining even more relevance. Governments and regulatory bodies worldwide are pushing for fair, interpretable AI models, and ElasticNet provides a foundation for meeting these requirements in finance, legal, and public sector applications. Looking ahead, ElasticNet will continue to be a vital tool in interpretable machine learning, but it will also evolve alongside other techniques. As new AI methodologies emerge, hybrid models that combine ElasticNet with non-linear algorithms could redefine how we approach regression and classification problems. The key takeaway? ElasticNet isn't going anywhere. It's only becoming more powerful, scalable, and adaptable in the age of AI. Now, let's wrap up everything we've learned with a final summary of ElasticNet regularization and its key takeaways. We've covered a lot about ElasticNet regularization, from its fundamentals to advanced applications, model tuning, ethical considerations, and future trends. Now, let's bring it all together with a final summary of the key takeaways. ElasticNet is a powerful hybrid of Lasso and ridge regression, offering the best of both worlds. It performs automatic feature selection like Lasso while maintaining stability in correlated variables like ridge. This makes it particularly effective for high-dimensional datasets, where traditional regression models struggle with multicollinearity and overfitting. The two key hyperparameters in ElasticNet are lambda, regularization strength, and alpha, L1 versus L2 ratio. Lambda controls how much regularization is applied, while alpha determines the balance between L1 and L2 penalties. Proper tuning of these parameters through cross-validation is essential for optimizing model performance and generalization. ElasticNet shines in industries where interpretability, stability, and feature selection matter. It is widely used in finance, healthcare, marketing, and scientific research, helping organizations make transparent, data-driven decisions. Unlike black box models like deep learning, ElasticNet provides clear insights into which features drive predictions, making it ideal for regulatory and compliance-heavy fields. Machine learning doesn't stop at model training. Ongoing maintenance, documentation, and ethical considerations are critical for long-term success. Organizations using ElasticNet should regularly monitor model performance, retrain with updated data, and ensure fairness in feature selection to prevent unintended biases. Looking ahead, ElasticNet will continue to evolve alongside AutoML, explainable AI, and hybrid modeling techniques. Advances in automated hyperparameter tuning, cloud computing, and scalable machine learning frameworks will make ElasticNet even more efficient and widely applicable. At its core, ElasticNet is about balance between bias and variance, between simplicity and complexity, and between accuracy and interpretability. When used correctly, it remains one of the most effective regularization techniques for structured data analysis, ensuring that models are both powerful and explainable. That wraps up our deep dive into Elastic Net regularization. Thank you for following along, and I hope this has provided valuable insights into how you can apply Elastic Net in your own machine learning projects. If you found this useful, consider exploring more advanced machine learning techniques and how Elastic Net integrates with other AI models.